Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? I had my monitor off. Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear on my end, Rep Smith.
Okay, great. I've just been advised by Will that the co-chairs are not arrived yet, and in my official capacity as vice chair, I get to entertain you while both Representative Williams and Senator Lopes return from wherever they are. This will be my first time chairing, and however brief that may be, it's kind of gone to my head, so I'm feeling the grandeur of chairmanship here for a few minutes. Today's hearing is limited to discussions of the one item agenda, which is the 830G statute, of which one item probably could derive more public comment than practically anything else that comes before us. I don't know that there is a particular protocol since I don't know if the ranking members, I don't know if you're a ranking member, Representative Paletta, or if you would want to say something.
No, thank you, Representative Smith. Let's get the hearing going.
Okay. Well, then why don't we start? Will, do we have a list of people ready to testify?
We can just wait for the chairs to come. They'll be here soon.
Okay. I don't know if there's anyone else in attendance that has anything. I suppose we'll wait till we get into the actual material of our business today. But would
Yes, let me open the chat.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks, Senator Lopes. I was in charge here for a few minutes.
I'm sure you did beautifully.
I don't know.
We can get Quentin will be on a couple minutes. We can get going with any. This is a public hearing. The Housing Committee, March 3rd, 2022. It is 2:05 p.m. Mr. Clerk, will you let us know which bills are on the agenda today?
SB 169 is on the agenda today.
Please read it. Read the title.
An act concerning a study of the effects of affordable housing policies in the state.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the chairs or ranking members before we start? I see Rep. Paletta shaking his head. I did not see Senator Ciccarelli yet, unless I'm mistaken.
He will be on this afternoon.
Oh, wonderful. And Representative Williams said he would be joining us shortly, but I believe we can probably get going. If you just let me open up the sheet of speakers, we will get going. The first, as usual, we will be doing 3 minutes for testimony per person. The first hour reserved for public officials, then moving to the public. And the first person I have on the list, well, it's number 2, unless I'm missing somebody, is Shante Hanks, Department of Housing Deputy Commissioner.
I think you're looking at the old speaking order.
Do we have a new one?
Yeah, I will resend it to you. The first one is State Senator Ryan Fazio.
Well, that's what I had before, so I don't know how I can set up. Hang on a second. Give me one moment, having technical difficulties. I hit it again and keeps saying that. Yeah, you're right. That's for March 1st. Don't know why that keeps coming up. Pardon the technical difficulties. All right, number 1, Senator Ryan Fazio, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, distinguished colleagues. I join you to speak in favor of SB 169 to re-examine and reform the state's 830G housing law. Our state can and should protect local control over planning and zoning and meet affordable housing goals in an effective manner. Yet 830G is counterproductive and demoralizing to many communities. After 32 years, the state statute has failed to achieve its own stated goals toward affordable housing and now causes more problems than it solves. Today, only 31 of 169 towns and cities have met their stated goals, and the sweeping law has also failed to generate upward mobility. Since the law took effect in 1990, the poverty rate in Connecticut has increased more than any state in the country, according to the US Census. Our policies aren't working to alleviate economic need. On top of that, 830G is demoralizing diverse communities across Connecticut by voiding their local planning and zoning rules. Connecticut is a proud state with great traditions of local control and local democracy. We know that the government that governs closest to the people governs best. Yet 830G totally voids local control for 138 towns and cities in favor of state rules that give special benefit to large developers that create little affordable housing. Instead, we need to encourage and reward diverse forms of affordable housing and local buy-in. 830G primarily recognizes government and deed-restricted housing while rewarding dense 830G complexes built by big developers. Instead, we should consider counting affordable housing based on the most accurate metric: how much it costs. Regardless of the year built, the deeds, accessory dwelling unit, or workforce housing or other naturally occurring affordable housing. Under the current rules, a more expensive unit counts as affordable if it meets certain state requirements than other private units, even if they're less expensive. That's not a sensible strategy. At the same time, these rules encourage dense developments that only include 30% affordable and only reward large developers at the expense of families and smaller property owners. In my district, a family that recently bought a home in a single family neighborhood is seeing their property value fall by over a quarter. Meanwhile, the town feels helpless with 100-unit complexes that are mostly not affordable popping up and altering the landscape. Diversity means that we can protect Connecticut's bucolic towns and build affordable housing in scale and style of those towns too. I cannot remember seeing an issue that united so many Democrats and Republicans in Southern Connecticut. Everyone wants to reach our affordable housing goals, and we need to do it by empowering local communities with more control over the issues which affect them and their towns directly. Please advance this bill.
Any questions for Senator Fazio? Representative Paletta.
Yes, very briefly, thank you, Chairman Lopes. Senator Fazio, thank you for joining us. I know you've been passionate about this issue, as well as a number of colleagues of mine on both sides of the aisle. What are some of the towns in Lower Fairfield County doing to advance affordable housing? Because we know there's a need for it. So what steps are you guys taking to advance affordable housing? Thank you.
Well, that's a great question, Representative Paletta. I can mostly speak to my district. In Greenwich, which is a very big town, I think it's 28% Alice in Greenwich. We have 4 Title I schools, including the middle school I went to. Right next to the middle school I went to, there's a large town affordable housing complex, and we recently renovated it. Governor Lamar came to the ribbon cutting and was complimentary of the great job that Greenwich in particular does on the affordable housing front. New Canaan has built a new affordable housing complex. It's 100 units. The town loves it. It supports it. It wants to expand it. And it was one of the 4 towns in the entire state that got a moratorium on affordable housing because of the good job it does. These towns, I can testify to the fact that they want to advance their affordable housing goals. They just want to do it with local buy-in, housing trusts, housing authorities, etc. Some locals say so. They're pushing forward, and they'll continue to push forward. They just want reforms to 830G in order to empower them, give them more input rather than totally push them to the sidelines.
Thank you.
I'll set any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator Fazio.
Thank you, sir.
Next on the list, I do have the right list, I hope, Representative Leeper.
Thank you so much, Senator Lopes. And thank you so much to the committee leadership. I'm here to speak in favor of SB 169 and advocate for some specific considerations. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak with you today about 830G. There may not be any single issue that has been as divisive in our community of Fairfield as 830G has. As most people agree, our state is facing an affordable housing crisis, and we need to find workable solutions so that every person, particularly every child, has access to safe and affordable housing. That being said, I think it's critically important to analyze the effectiveness and impact of 830G, as it has been significantly disproportional impact on a small number of communities, one of which is Fairfield. I understand the intent of 830G is to leverage the private sector to fund the construction of additional workforce housing units that we refer to as affordable. This results in development only occurring in communities where developers want to build and that have piped water and sewer, and has almost no impact on other communities. One of the frustrations that I hear from my community over and over again is that the applications accepted under the 830G waiver are adding a tremendous amount of density to our already dense community while making incremental progress toward the 10% 830G threshold. In Fairfield, we have around 22,000 housing units. For the simplicity of the math, let's assume we have 20,000 units. To achieve 10% affordable under exclusively 830G permits, which I understand is not the intent of the law, the town would need to add an additional 10,000 units, 30% of which would be deeded affordable to reach that 10% goal. While it may be mathematically feasible, practically speaking, it's impossible. I think analyzing 830G and its impact on communities is critically important because I believe we can do better as a state, both in terms of meaningfully expanding our affordable housing stock across all communities and not only some, and also having a policy that achieves this in a way that is less disruptive to the communities. A few suggestions for your consideration. One would be to lower the affordable housing stock percentage goal for which developers can apply for 830G waivers to the moratorium level, so long as towns continue to also meet their 830J goals. Analyze affordable housing initiatives within the context of towns' 830J plans so that every town is held accountable to meeting established goals to diversify their housing stock, and explore how towns will be held accountable to implementing their 830J plans. And analyze ways to incentivize redevelopment to optimize the development of affordable housing so as to also protect green space. I hope one of the goals we can be to empower towns to create and implement long-term plans of how and where they will focus development so that there is transparency with residents about the future of development and they aren't constantly worried about what development could occur, because under 830G, any lot can be converted into multifamily and doesn't have to adhere to the zoning regulations that an individual homeowner must abide by. I thank you so much for your time and consideration of this important opportunity to evaluate the impact of 830G and how we can improve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Representative Zullo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rep. Leeper, for your testimony and your comments. Just a quick follow-up. one of the concerns that I often get, or one of the complaints that I get with 8-30G is that towns are often saying it's costing them a fortune as far as litigation costs go, as far as trying to hold developers accountable. It's not that they don't want affordable housing. It's just that because of the advantages that the developers have, because of the burden shifting under the statute as far as appeals go, that they almost need to take it to court in order to make sure that they get a fair shake. Has that been your experience in Fairfield or in the towns you represent? Has your town had to deal with rising legal costs or costs associated with 8-30G?
Thanks for the question, Rep. Zullo. I think that's a great question. It's actually not one of the primary concerns that I've been hearing, but I'll circle back with my town planning and zoning and ask about that cost. I know over the past 10 years, our town planning and zoning has taken action on approving 23 830G proposals, and that each of these typically continues to be litigated for a couple years. And so each project becomes pretty disruptive to the community. But in terms of legal costs, I don't have those numbers for you today, but I'm happy to look into that.
We could connect offline on it. That's a large number though, 23. And if they've all gone to litigation, I don't know that they all have, but even if a substantial number have, I can imagine that those costs could probably rise. No further questions. I appreciate the extra comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Representative Leeper? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up is my buddy, Representative Devlin.
Thank you, Senator. Great to see you. And also to the leadership of the committee and other members as well. I am really appreciative of you holding this hearing today. I know this was a topic that as a committee you weren't going to be tackling this session, but I think it's just a great opportunity to hear more about 830G and also maybe learn more about 830G, our state statute related to affordable housing. I believe is in serious need of revision. And while it's intended to increase affordable housing in our state when it was enacted in 1989, I would suggest that it has not achieved its goal and that it's done very little to significantly benefit affordable housing availability, or importantly, putting people on a path to home ownership, which we hear so much about, or certainly did last session, the ability to create intergenerational wealth. What 830G has done is created a path for incredible wealth building among private developers, as they're able to circumvent local zoning and exploit the statute for their own financial gain. I've submitted multiple concepts this session that address 830G. And let me just focus on a couple of the areas that they would touch on. One of those is, to maximize profit, the lion's share of privately funded developments. They're large apartment complexes that designate 30% of their units as affordable for 30 years. The rest of them are a market rate. So it becomes virtually impossible for communities to be able to reach that threshold as they continue to increase the density based on the added market rate units. So one of the ideas is to either lower that threshold, or perhaps we also have developers, if they're so intent on increasing affordable housing, that perhaps it should be a higher threshold than 30% of their units, which might also shed some light on the profit motivation of them, being involved. Communities also that have been progressive in providing affordable housing are actually penalized under the current statute. Because affordable housing that was in place before 1990 isn't counted. And in addition, there are neighborhoods and sections of our communities that are by their nature affordable, but they're not included either. In addition, under the current legislation, senior citizens are basically discriminated against because a unit for senior housing doesn't count the same. And for many communities, and especially in Fairfield County, where we're a high cost area, it's really difficult for seniors to be able to afford and stay in their homes. As developers target historic communities that haven't met their threshold, they're able to circumvent our local zoning laws. That includes regulations regarding building height, lot coverage, distance from other properties and roads, and particularly historical preservation and property values. We have a community neighborhood in the town of Fairfield that I think it's a 1/4 acre lot. They are going to be getting upwards of 40 apartment built right within single family homes. That will certainly have an impact. The appeals of denials do follow an alternate procedure, and it puts the burden of proof on the zoning commission as opposed to the well-funded attorneys of the deep pocket developers. So that is another concept that I had submitted to your committee, but I would welcome the opportunity to not only look at how communities can increase affordable housing, but also the shortfalls of the existing legislation, because I think the intentions are good and are well supported, but the mechanisms of the law in place are really offer significant negative unintended consequences and need to be addressed. So thank you very much.
Hi, you're at your 3 minutes, but it looks like you have a question.
Timing was perfect. Representative Paletta, please ask the question.
I had my timer and it went off at 2:59 and I pushed the button. So one brief question. Representative Devlin, we talked about this offline, and I think it's just very briefly, if you could explain a proposal that I thought was of merit and maybe can be tackled down the future. Any dwelling built before 1990 is not counted, correct? And in your opinion, what would that do to achieving that level if we were able to count those dwellings that were built prior to 1990?
Well, right, and it's a pretty arbitrary designation to exclude any buildings before 1990. So it would certainly help communities reach their first year moratorium under the existing statute. That doesn't last forever, right? You have a 4-year moratorium should towns achieve that. And I think we heard earlier, maybe only 31 communities have achieved that. And it's always a moving target. What I would say within our town of Fairfield, and we recently had a meeting with the housing commissioner to seek some support for a designated affordable community development. And I was really impressed with her and her willingness and what seemed like an understanding of some of the challenges with the existing statute. But we have an inclusionary zoning in place in Fairfield. We have a designated housing trust fund in Fairfield. We have a transit-oriented development overlay area around our metro train station. I mean, there are multiple things that the community is also doing in a commitment to provide affordable housing. But it is always, the developers that come in, and I would encourage the committee leadership, go take a field trip. I'm sure that all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, particularly in Fairfield County, would welcome you and let us show you what is happening in our towns and what's being proposed in our towns. And I would think there's also just concern. I know there's, in some of the other committees where zoning is talked about a lot, there's a real aversion to talking about character of towns. But in our historic communities, that's a real asset, not just locally to the people that live here, but to our state and in terms of economic development. So I would welcome, and I see some of my Fairfield County colleagues on the Zoom here, for you to come and see firsthand what is actually happening and being proposed.
Thank you, Representative. Representative, are you complete?
It wasn't my question. I just had a quick follow-up if you'll indulge.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Rep. Devlin, for the testimony. Just very quickly, it was Rep. Leeper's comments that actually struck me, and I went to go look at it. Between 2002 and 2022, the number of affordable housing units that Fairfield has actually gotten credit for. And her comment that you'd have to add 10,000 homes, 30% of which would have to be affordable. Does Fairfield actually have the physical capacity to add 10,000 homes, or is it logistically impossible? I'm just curious.
Well, I don't know if it's logistically impossible if you buy a single family home on a 1/4 acre lot and then you are installing a 100-unit apartment building. which is not, I think, what was intended. But no, as the number of units increases, particularly with the large number of market rate apartments that are being put in place. And our Director of Economic Development keeps, and I'm sure most towns do, a very detailed tracking of all of the particular units, and you might be interested in that as well. It is extremely challenging, if not impossible, to ever reach the goal.
That was going to be my follow-up question. I know it's hard to really pinpoint, but my question was going to be, do you feel like it's impossible to reach the goal? Because that's the sentiment that I hear offline when people talk about their frustrations with 8-30G.
Absolutely. And it's disheartening to so many, not because there isn't a desire for affordable housing, but what's happening to neighborhoods with just totally inappropriate developments that are enabled because a for-profit developer can bypass zoning concerns.
Well, again, I appreciate the indulgence and I appreciate your time today. So thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Any further questions for Representative Devlin? Seeing none, thank you very much. Laura?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Always a pleasure.
And next I have on the list, Representative Allie-Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank my distinguished colleagues for allowing me the opportunity to testify today. The need for affordable housing is critical here in Connecticut and in Fairfield County. Unfortunately, the general statute, section 8-30G, the state law created to encourage the development of affordable housing, has fallen short in its goals and instead has led to unfair shortcuts which allow developers to bypass local zoning laws. While I understand the rationale for a study to recommend improvements to the law, I question the value of this additional step. The long-standing deficiencies which have plagued this process are already extensively documented, and what we need now is action. We know that local affordable housing plans are the first step in motivating local communities to truly address more diverse housing, which will ultimately lead to revisions in local zoning laws. As you may know, in June of 2020, the Department of Housing funded a $50,000 grant initiative to award towns with under 50,000 residents up to $5,000 to support the creation of affordable housing plans. In June of 2021, the legislature adopted components pertaining to the zoning statutes and required that affordable housing plans be filed with the state no later than June 1st of this year. And according to the Office of Policy Management inventory, 26 of 169 municipalities have filed their reports as of February 2022. So clearly these mandates are not working. That is why I have introduced language to amend 8-30G to award 5 housing unit equivalent points to towns or cities that develop, review, and amend an affordable housing plan. This will create an incentive for towns to buy into the need for affordable housing and help them feel a sense of accomplishment towards meeting that elusive goal of having 10% of their housing certified as affordable. I think it's important that we protect and reward towns that are increasing access to affordable housing for all individuals. This will allow an opportunity to show much needed collaboration between the state and local authorities. I strongly encourage the committee to go further and take up this language. Each municipality in Connecticut has different needs, infrastructure, and topography. If we're going to adopt a study, it must require collaboration and partnership with local governments and all stakeholders. And I appreciate you guys giving me this time today.
Thank you, Representative. I didn't see who went up first, but Representative Paletta, please proceed.
Thank you. And Representative Allie-Brennan, thank you so much for testifying today. I know that this is an important issue to you. In your general area, and my district's somewhat close, but in your general area, what is, for say, like the town of Bethel done to address this issue locally?
Well, we've done a lot. I mean, we've created a transit-oriented development district requiring 20% affordable housing, accessory apartments, regulations requiring 20% on projects of 5 units or more. We've created an affordable housing zone with a 20% requirement as well. We have a housing authority with 125 units, and it almost seems like we'll never reach that 10%. We have an affordable housing plan. We're one of the towns that have done that. We've done what the state has asked us, and yet, our laws are still getting circumvented by these local developers. And, I was one of those members who voted in the past to pass legislation that would get rid of the term character, because I do think we should be specific. That helps towns not get sued. What do you mean when you're saying character of a town? Is it the setback? Is it the size? Is it the architecture? Those are issues we have in Bethel where we have no control over, and that's what we're trying to address here.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If seeing that, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Allie-Brennan, I saw your proposal before. I brought it up with we have in Milford, my district, a community development director who is also in charge of the affordable housing inventory and making all the necessary filings. I mentioned that the fact we were working with SCROG to come up with our 830J, our plan for affordable housing, which we do expect to submit by the June 1st deadline. I was struck by the numbers that 26 out of 169 towns, they've had 5 years to do this. So the first question they asked me was, where does the 5 points come from? That's hardly the equivalent of 300 points in all other calculations in the 830G statute. It doesn't add up to an awful lot of advantage. I think it's certainly helpful, but where did 5 come from? And is there any way we could
I mean, yeah, those were conversations I had with my own town planner in Bethel. Beth Cavagna, she's done immense work on this. She's also on the state task force for affordable housing. I think we have to give some people just, the incentive. That's what we're trying to work towards. I mean, I'm happy to negotiate with the committee on the number, but that's a starting point. We'd love to work more to see what would be an appropriate number. But for me, I felt that was fair. But yes, I am too. I'm shocked at the number of towns that have not created an affordable housing plan. I think it's the first step, and it should have been done already.
I think there's a sense of futility with it because of the 30 years that we've been dealing with. I remember meeting on this at the Board of Aldermen in Milford back in the 90s and being told that some people that ended up in the legislature, including Senator Gail Schlossberg, that they'd be taking this up when we went to the 2020s. Here we are, and that's exactly the case. So I support the idea. Do you happen to know what's the penalty if they don't have a plan of affordable housing by June 1st?
I'm not sure. I actually don't know what the penalty is, but it seems like it's been mandated several times and still no one is doing it. So concerning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the good representative, I hear you're concerned about affordable housing and reaching the threshold you need in your area and towns you represent. I heard you reference the 10% golden standard, and yes, we hope that towns will get to that level, but have you looked into what it would take just to reach the moratorium? Because for those that are having difficulty, I think that for those who are having difficulty, the first step is actually reaching the level to get that moratorium, which will buy you some years to actually put together and work the rest of your plan to actually reach that 10%. And you can qualify for multiple moratoriums, which for no other reason will give you protection against any developer actually circumventing your local zoning, which is the point of contention for many municipalities. So do you have any idea of what the threshold for you reaching a moratorium would be and how close you are to it?
Well, I know Bethel is around 6%. I know Bethel is around 6%, but I mean, let's be fair. We do have a lot of affordable housing in Bethel. It's a working class town, and some of that doesn't count because it's technically not new under the law. And like I said, we've created a transit-oriented development district requiring 20% accessory apartments. We have regulations requiring 20% on projects of 5 units or more. We've created affordable housing zone, 20%. We seem to can't meet it because of the large increase in development overall. And that's been an issue because of that. We've had significant development in the town. So it just seems like an elusive goal for us to reach. And that's why we're doing the right things. We've done the affordable housing plan. We've created a housing authority, and yet we're so far away from that goal. Meanwhile, there's been immense development in the town. And so I think that this law that the language I presented could help towns reach that goal. And in doing so, they've also created a plan to address the affordable housing needs and problems that they have.
Okay, well, well, with everything you said, it sounds like you guys should have, if all the numbers you talked about were reached, it sounds like you should be very close to reaching the standard for a moratorium. And if you get a moratorium for 4 or 5 years, that is really the first step on actually protecting your town. So I would just look at revisit some of those numbers and see what is acceptable or not acceptable by the Department of Housing. And that's one area that may be able to be looked into in the future. But certainly if you have that kind of those significant numbers, any town that hasn't qualified as of yet, the first step is reaching that moratorium, because it's going to buy you at least 4 or 5 years to actually further get your act together while providing more affordable housing and freeing your towns from the developers just building whatever they want in your towns. So I just wanted to share that, and to actually, you may want to consider looking at those numbers again to see how close they are to the threshold of meeting that moratorium figure.
Sure, and I mean, I would just add that, you know, I represent more than one town. There's other towns across the state that I think should be meeting these goals. Bethel is one of those towns that is doing the right thing, and yet we're still being penalized by this law. And so that's what I'm here just to say today, that, you know, we don't have 4 or 5 years more to wait to reach a moratorium. These issues are happening daily. We're seeing, you know, introductions of zoning, and just these projects don't fit with the town. And we would just like some local control back, because we are doing the right things and we are trying to address the issues. So I appreciate your comments, and maybe we'll disagree on this.
Okay, well, we don't have to disagree. You could pursue your path. I just was offering some insight, and how you decide to go forward is in your court. But I was just trying to give some helpful insight. That's it. Well, good luck. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Any other questions for Representative Allie-Brennan? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. Our next testifier is Representative Meskers, and I have to say, hola, por favor, prosiga.
Mil gracias.
Muito
obrigado, if we're going to go down the Portuguese route. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify. At this point in time, the need for testimony on the 830G is basically because of a tremendous rally in rental prices. And so people don't often think of Greenwich as a diverse community. I think Senator Fazio highlighted the issue. Well, overall, we have over 30% of our group in the Alice population in Greenwich. In addition to that, you will find that my district, or the town as a whole, we have 20% of the population in Title I schools. My district alone has something on the order of 40% of the students. So we have a very diverse economic group. Where we're faulting is in the calculation under 830G for affordable housing with restricted housing units. And you've heard from the various members before me speak about how those are calculated. We in Greenwich have a housing authority. The housing authority, it's called Greenwich Communities. There are 5 housing authority buildings or structures in my town. 4 of them are in my district. We've given them a fair amount of support. We're in the process of renovating them. We've had the governor, as Senator Fazio mentioned, to come in. I think the construct of 830G, the problem with it is that the units are 70% market-based, 30% are affordable. Those affordable units in many cases are single bedrooms, so they're not really giving you, I think, what the goal of diversity in the community should be. I can guarantee you that we have an interest in affordable housing in town. We would like to work with the state to find a happy solution to increase our affordable housing stock. I stand ready to help us in that process, and I would look for your support for that. I would ask you to hear from all of us. I think Representative Butler was accurate in terms of his commentary about a moratorium. The mechanism of a moratorium requires that you get to a certain number of units with a certificate of occupancy. The problem is if you have a deficit and now you have units coming in through the builders, is that you get a myriad of units forced through the approval process with 70% market-based, 30% affordable before you can apply to get a moratorium. So it basically jumpstarts the process. In my town, I believe we have something on the order of 9 or 10 different fairly significant projects under review through our planning and zoning department. It's not the issue of affordable housing. It's the issue that the shortfall that we have will force us through developers to do on the order of 5,000 units of housing, where our shortfall is on the order of 750 to 1,000 units, depending on how you define the affordable stock. We would rather see get back the ability to build the affordable
You
housing.
are at your 3 minutes, so please summarize.
Okay, and I think that, and I've submitted written testimony, which I recommend you take a look at. And I'm free for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative Meskers. Any questions? I do not see any hands up. Thank you very much. We'll go on to our next speaker, which is Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Chairman Lopes, Chairman Williams, members of the Housing Committee. I want to thank you for allowing me to testify today on Senate Bill 169. I'm going to take a completely different approach than the previous speakers, though, and highlight my frustrations that this conversation has once again come to this building in such a limited form. It's been a few years since we've seen bills like this. The chief proponents of this bill made me feel a little bit more concerned than I otherwise was by the title, which is simply to study the effect of affordable housing statutes in the state of Connecticut. That is a very laudable goal. It's very important for us to ensure that our state statutes are aligned to produce as many affordable housing units as we can in our state, given the significant value skyrocketing rents and home values that we see. Housing accessibility is out of reach for a huge number of our Connecticut residents. 830G is the only state statute, the only one that we have at our tool to impact housing creation in so many of the towns across our state. Now, we started 5 years ago reforming 8-30G, and we created this housing affordability plans that municipalities were required to develop. And at that time, when we looked at 830G, people wanted us to develop this planning process because they wanted to show how serious they were. They were serious about wanting to create affordable housing in their communities. And to date, only 26 towns have actually done so. Frankly, I resent a lot of these attacks in 8-30G and a lot of the misinformation that has been indicated even today in this hearing. It's not true that housing units created before 1990 don't count. They certainly do. They all do. Every single one of them counts. That is not true that they don't count if they're created before 1990. It's a misconception that's been articulated over and over again. Towns don't need to create 10,000 units to meet their goals. What they need to do, if they're only looking at 830G, if they're only looking at being sued by a local developer because they've denied their application, then maybe, yes. But there are numerous other opportunities that communities have to reach moratoriums, to construct, to better fund their housing authorities, to construct actual units in town, to partner with nonprofit developers. They don't need to create that many units in their town. That's only if they want to go through an adversarial process with a local developer, and that's the only tool. It's not. 830G was never intended to be the housing creation tool across our state. That was not the goal. It didn't fail to live up to its goal. It's done exactly what it was supposed to do, which is create tens of thousands of private market affordable housing units across our state. It's done exactly what we wanted it to do. And there are communities in Connecticut who fought it tooth and nail every step along the way. But we didn't become the most segregated state, one of the most segregated states in the country on accident. It was through local control that happened. It was local control that's created a lot of the economic, income, and racial segregation that we have. It is the use of locally restrictive land covenants, religious and racial restrictive
You're
land
at your
covenants.
3-minute mark, so do please summarize.
And beyond, that has created the scenario, that situation that we're in. And 830G is the one state statute that we have that holds towns accountable.
Representative Lamar, I have a question for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, Senator Lopes. I have a privilege of co-chairing the Connecticut's Commission on Development and Future, the subcommittee on municipal affordable housing plans. That kicks off later this afternoon. I encourage everyone to come talk about what kind of tools they need at the local level to ensure they get their municipal affordable housing plans done, and then make sure that people are taking this seriously. Because again, 8-30G has worked. There are a number of other things that local communities need to be doing to reach their affordable housing goals. This being the one statute that allows developers to say, when towns deny affordable housing, to say, okay, are the reasons because of health, safety, and general welfare? Or is it because the long-term historical trends of local control on planning and zoning has been to segregate our communities? 830G has worked.
And Mr. Chair, I do have a few questions also.
Please.
So I know you said there was a correction about the 1990 housing that does not count. Are there what are the things that do count? If you can help share that to some of the members that may not know, or some of the people that are watching on YouTube.
Sure, there's occasionally a conflation amongst what counts towards an eligible affordable unit. These are deed restricted units. And the number was established at 10%, not because we thought that a community only needed 10% of their units to be affordable, but that because we wanted them to be deed restricted, so they exist in perpetuity. You want to make sure that at least 10% of your housing stock is deed restricted affordable. If it was naturally occurring affordable, those don't count. Well, if we want it to be naturally occurring affordable, that number would be like 50%. We want 100% of our housing stock to be affordable to all buyers. We established 10% because it meant deed restricted in perpetuity, that number. And so any unit that is deed restricted, built any time in the past, counts towards that 10%. The 1990 number is just how we award moratorium points. And that's because towns, again, upset that they weren't reaching their goal and being subject to these evil profit-driven developers, said we need some relief from that. And so we established a moratorium process to say, okay, towns are taking this seriously, that are actually constructing new units. We will give you 4 or 5 years where developers can't utilize 8-30G. And so the moratorium points, the units that are constructed after 1990, are to help towns that are showing progress. Of course, you don't show progress by saying, well, we want to claim units that were developed 35 years ago. No, it's progress. You're making progress towards that goal. So it's new units that you are creating, getting online now. If anything, you should maybe move that number up from 1990 to 2000, because towns that are showing progress have to show that it's been, in the last few decades that they've created these housing units. But I don't want to be too inflammatory about how we can actually make our housing statutes better. There were a number of other provisions that were considered when 8-30G was adopted that were not adopted at the same time, that would have had even harder challenges for communities. So we thought that was a little too much, that there was buy-in around 8-30G. Sadly, a number of communities have just fought it tooth and nail ever since and not taken seriously their responsibility to correct the decades of local control and local exclusionary zoning policies and local housing development policies that they enacted.
Thank you. Now, many of the 830G policies, or many of the developments that use 830G as a mechanism to get approval, are those both for-profit and nonprofit developers, or just nonprofit, just for-profit?
Both for-profit and nonprofit developers have utilized 8-30G. And there are different types of 8-30G proposals that come in. And some of them are friendly, some of them are, adversarial. Ideally, you're not going through that process. Ideally, a local community is partnering with developers and achieving their economic goals and their housing development goals along with a developer. So you can actually have a productive conversation. If you don't like the threshold numbers, well, you can talk to that local developer and say, hey, you know, you're doing this at 30%. You know, how can we get you to do 50% affordable? How can we work with you to move this forward in a more advantageous way for the town? Like, it doesn't have to be an adversarial process. I mean, sadly, in some towns, you actually have towns forcing their local housing authorities to sue them to build affordable units in their towns. So this is, you know, there's an approach that we take where that many towns have taken, actually, and I think I see former First Select person Klein is after me today. There are incredible people on this call that you can deal with who've done this on a professional level, who can tell you the incredible examples of housing that have been developed across this state utilizing 8-30G in productive, constructive ways. And they can also tell you the incredible barriers that local communities who don't take this seriously put in the way.
And I think at least just one more question. I've heard about this idea of particularly the for-profit developers, that they're just trying to make money. Is there any reason why these for-profit businesses should be limited in how much they can earn, or to restrict their income potential? I mean, I'm surprised to hear that.
I'm always surprised that people who say, like, well, these developers are just developing homes to make money, as if that isn't how housing has been developed in every community forever. That is how all housing developments are done. I don't know too many people who've built homes hoping to lose money on them. But in the service of building affordable housing, it is true that it is really, really expensive. And typically the only way that you can do it, if you're not working with a housing authority or a local government that is supportive of the goals and working with you to create ways to reduce costs or reduce barriers to construction, is to do a market-based blend, right? And so you have typically a 70-30 development in which they're creating higher rent units as part of that construction. And that's to cover the cost of 30% being affordable. And you know, it's the one private market solution that we have that's creating these units. No one thinks that 830G is supposed to be the one tool that creates housing. Sadly, for communities that don't take affordable housing construction seriously, that's the only thing they see. They're not empowering their housing authorities. They're not giving them additional dollars. They're not being creative with the development that comes in. They're not going out and indeed restricting naturally occurring affordable housing. Like there's attempts that many communities actually utilize to go out and indeed restrict these naturally occurring affordable housing units, or to partner with local developers or local realtors to do so. I mean, there's a lot of approaches that towns can take, claiming that the 830G developers are, you know, pariahs on our town. Is just a tool to politically insulate themselves from the fact that they're not taking affordable housing construction seriously on their own.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very interested in how you described it as a market solution, but I have no further questions. I do see Senator Anwar has questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Lamar, for your testimony and very clear perspective. Can you talk about the rationale and the reasoning for some of the hysteria that we see in some of the towns?
I sure can. Look, I think there's always this push in Connecticut for this ideal of local control, and we decide on our own. You see it in ways both good and bad. Like, we rally together to help our community when a fire happens, and that's terrific. And we want to make sure that our neighbors are protected. And you know, in New Haven, there's oftentimes like GoFundMe pages for our local schools when a family suffers a tragedy, or we welcome Afghani immigrants into our state. We want to make sure that they're having the necessary basic food and supplies. And there's a sense of local community about that, and like ensuring we're looking out for one another. But you also get a bad sense of it. And you see it a couple of years ago with these hands off our schools groups, or you saw it with, I have a bill that I introduce every year about access to local beaches. And I think zoning and affordable housing fits into that same mindset of this is mine, this is my community, and how dare anyone who hasn't done what I've done be welcome here. And it's frustrating. It's really difficult to overcome because there's always a fear of something new, I suppose. But also there's, I think an unfortunate sense that it's unearned or undeserved. And then people hear affordable housing and they hear like, oh goodness, like my local zoning is going to be overrun, and they associate all the misinformation and all the fears that are been proven false, like the property values are going to go down. That's been proven false. That people aren't going to, the schools are going to be overrun with children. Like you hear that all of the time, and all these things are false, and they send a bad signal about what an open community should look like.
Okay. And another thing was, can you speak a little bit about the diversity in homes and as well as diversity in housing, having an opportunity for young families, young workers, as well as early retirees, and how that benefits the towns in our state?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. Like when you look at, I've represented 3 communities in the legislature at my time here. I represented the city of New Haven. I've represented the town of Hamden and the town of East Haven. 2 of the communities I represent have been opposed in the past to the 830G as it's currently constructed. But one of those towns, Hamden, has actually changed its tune. They've actually welcomed a number of housing developments into their community that formerly went through the 830G process in an adversarial way. And now instead, when developers come into that town, they're generally welcomed by the local economic development officials because it is providing housing for young families. It is providing a way for their town and community to grow in and around the health sector and their universities. It's providing places for young renters, people who grew up in that town, to find a first place to live, to save money for 5 to 10 years, to send more children to their schools. It's been a positive development, I think, in every community to welcome new people into their community. We are a stagnant growth state that grows in places that allow new housing. And that has been the evidence. When you look at the results of the census, if you're building new housing units, your towns are growing. And if you're welcome to these types of developments, you're not going to see population loss. You're not going to be worried about closing schools. You're not going to be worried about retaining the young people in your community. And I think these types of developments are positive. And I just again highlight in your testimony today, you will see numerous residents of the town of Hamden pro 8-30G. And that was not true 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was widespread community opposition. Towns that embrace this and do it right and welcome people in and work with developers, they see the positive impacts in their local communities. And again, you have some really esteemed people who are testifying before you today. I know that former First Select Person Klein is soon after me, and she's got a great experience of telling her local community, and local communities that have embraced this have a lot of great experiences to tell. And so I thank you for the question. I just think the communities that are growing, that are vibrant, that are exciting, that are finding a place for young people to learn, live, and grow their families are the ones that are going to succeed in the next 20 years.
Thank you so much, Representative Lamar. Truly appreciate you and your testimony. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I don't see any further questions, although I would recommend in the future you be a little bit more passionate about what you believe. It would probably help your testimony. But good to see you again. You're the one I missed the most, Scarecrow. I don't see Representative Callahan on. So we'll be 3 o'clock. We're switching over to the public. First one on the public is Jerry Taugus, who I don't see on either. I could be mistaken, so I check. Not seeing Mr. Taugus. I would like to go to Yvonne Klein, who I did see.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished chairs and members of the Housing Committee. I'm Yvonne Klein, CEO of the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness, former Housing Commissioner under Dan Malloy, and former First Selectwoman, Town of Darien. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak with you. I am testifying to express concerns with and urge you to vote no on SB 169. 830G is one of the state's most important zoning laws, encouraging towns to comply with their long-term standing obligations under the state's Zoning Enabling Act 8-2, and I quote, to promote housing choice and economic diversity and housing, including housing for both low and moderate income households. 8-30G works because we've seen affordable housing development in places that may not have otherwise chosen to develop without this added encouragement by 8-30G. Yet, today, throughout our state, we have homeless individuals and families who have housing vouchers in hand with no affordable home available to them, including in Fairfield County, from where this bill originates. And today, so far, we've heard a lot of support for affordable housing. And it's hard to believe that cities and towns don't have their housing plans completed and have not been building affordable housing year after year. You know, are we hearing, if not for 830G, we would be building affordable housing? Further, CCEH supports policies and zoning laws that strengthen 830G to enable the creation of more affordable housing in every city and in every town in Connecticut. As you know, deed-restricted affordable housing provides options to individuals and families, real people, to live in areas of opportunity or near to their work, or have some other option rather than owning a large home on a large piece of land. So as I had mentioned, so many of our elected officials, they support affordable housing. They support CCEH's mission to end homelessness in Connecticut. But to achieve this goal, we need safe, secure, deed-restricted affordable housing in all of our cities and towns. Our need for affordable housing is clear. We need more tools like 8-30G to make developing affordable housing for our residents easier in every community across the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Klein. I see a question from Representative Paletta.
Hi, Ms. Klein, good afternoon. I have a quick question for you. You said you were a former First Select Woman in Fairfield County?
Yes.
For which town again?
Darien.
Oh, Darien. Okay, great. I knew I heard the town, but I couldn't remember it. But thank you. So I guess my question is this. I've asked this question to a number of legislators, and I guess since you were elected in Fairfield County, I'm going to ask you as well. How is it that there's such a disconnect from town to town in Fairfield County? Like, for instance, I went to school in Fairfield University, and I know that Darien's right down the road. How could it be that the town of Darien, has no problem and sees this as all great, or for instance, the city of New Haven sees it as great, as Representative Lamar testified, but Greenwich and Fairfield and Bethel and all of these other towns are saying that it needs to be amended or fixed. So I'm wondering, since you worked in the administration under Dan Malloy, if you could offer some insight as to, with a town so close to one another in their proximity, i.e. Fairfield County, there has to be some congruence there. Like, there can't just be this huge disconnect where you go from one town to another and everyone has a different opinion. And that's my first question is, how come, each town has differing opinions? And second, have you gone to like a town like Fairfield and heard their concerns? Because I have to trust that legislators on both sides of the aisle have brought this as a concern, and I can't for the life of me imagine that they're making it up. So would you be willing to go down there, or would this committee, I guess, would be willing to take a field trip and discuss these issues locally with these legislators and residents who are really, asking for help? Thank you.
Lots there. I'm going to do my best here. Okay, so number one, former Fairfield resident. I too am a Fairfield U alum, so nice to meet you. Here in Darien, look, affordable housing is a tough topic in Fairfield County. And I'm not saying that here in Darien, it's an easy topic, but in Darien, we're actually building affordable housing and approving projects without going to court, especially lately, which is good news. I would say in the past 15 years, we've not had an 830G application go to court. So in the town of Darien, under my leadership, affordable housing, that was the early part of this century, was a huge issue in the town. And we began the development of, or the redevelopment and expansion of one of our family housing authority properties from 52 units to 106 units, which, please come and see the heights. So that project began during my tenure. We also voted, and we have still an inclusionary zoning regulation. We just upped the percentage of affordable units to be included in each project from 12 to 14% affordable. I championed certainly that legislation when I was first selectman at 12%. And then in my tenure as first selectman, we wrote the town's affordable housing plan. So in Darien, we took steps to educate the community, make this a part of a productive conversation in the community, and try to dispel the myths like we've heard today. Representative Lamar did a great job of dispelling some of the myths. So that's terrific. So I think this is an overall tough topic in Fairfield County, especially in our communities, especially in the suburbs where we were built to be single family, right? 91% of our housing stock, 95% of our housing stock is single family homes on fairly decent sized lots in most of our communities. Fairfield has smaller lot sizes. It's a little more diverse in some ways. Here in Darien, we've been building multifamily housing over 40 years. And certainly Fairfield has been building multifamily housing over the years. Yes, I've met actually with the former first selectman in Fairfield as housing commissioner, the current first select woman. She and I knew and worked together during my tenure as housing commissioner. But I think, what we're seeing is we have a real need for affordable housing in this state. And especially in Fairfield County, this isn't about counting units. This is about homes that people can afford so that people can live near to where they work. It shouldn't be a luxury to live in Fairfield County and live near to where you work. We should be able to live near our jobs and find an affordable home. As commissioner, I would talk to businesses coming into Connecticut, thinking of coming into Connecticut, and those employers were concerned about where they were going to get their workforce, where there's going to be, would there be housing for all levels of their workforce. So I hope I've remembered everything. I don't think there's a difference of opinion. I think there's a difference of approach within the municipalities. And Darien has had 2 moratorium. The second one expired in October of 2021. Last week, or within 2 weeks, Planning and Zoning just approved a multifamily project here in Darien and added additional affordable units to that project. So we recognize here we need affordable housing, and Planning and Zoning continues to approve projects, and I hope that continues.
Thank you. And I guess if I'm understanding it correctly, it seems like maybe Darien, in your opinion, has done a better job than other towns in Fairfield County. Perhaps planning for low-income housing over the years, I'm not sure. I'm certainly not an expert on low-income housing, but I can say, judging on what I've heard and the testimony, not only this year, but in the last couple of years that I've sat on this committee, it has been a real concern. And as you acknowledged, it is a very difficult topic, especially for the towns in Fairfield County. Now, I live in Watertown, I'm in Litchfield County, but it's also an issue here too. Not as prevalent, of course, as it is in Fairfield County, but it's still an issue. So my hope is, and I'll just end with this, I hope that we can come to some sort of an agreement eventually on getting some sort of a conformity in local leaders also sitting at the table like yourself, because you have an insight, right? You have local elected office. Not all of us in the legislature had local elected office. So it's very different to govern from the state at the top and say, oh, we're going to do all this stuff and just pass it on to the municipalities, but rather bring the towns in that are, both positively affected by it and adversely affected by it, and see what ideas they have and maybe move forward with something more comprehensive, because there clearly is two sides to the story. And if you're an outsider and you don't know anything about affordable housing, you don't know what to believe. And it seems like there really is no right or wrong answer, because in some communities, there is compelling reason to believe that it needs to be reformed. And in others, maybe such as yourself, it's not a problem and no one seems to be bothered by it, rather. So I would definitely be interested in taking a trip down to Fairfield County, meeting with local leaders in all the towns, or at least in multiple towns, maybe ones that see it as more of an issue and ones that don't, and kind of weigh the options rather than trying to sit up in Hartford and make this decision based on what we hear from just a handful of people, but rather see it and talk to the people that live it every day and understand it. But I really thank you for your testimony, and it was very insightful. And I would say, based on what I've heard from you, that the town of Darien's doing well, and that's great. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you. I see Representative Butler with his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd just like to say hello to Commissioner Klein. I know that's not your official title, but I'll always think of you that way. And I'm so glad that you're engaged in the fight to actually address homelessness here in the state. My good friend, Representative Pluto, actually asked if you would be willing to meet with people in Fairfield County to talk about these issues. But as I know from your experience as commissioner, that you not only met with municipalities in Fairfield County on how to develop their housing plans, also worked with them on how to actually work on a plan to reach moratoriums. And you did that with municipalities all over the state. So, I mean, I think you're a little modest. I don't think you shared enough of what your background was and what you added to the whole equation in encouraging municipalities to actually build more affordable housing, having a plan, and also taking those first steps on reaching that moratorium. So I think that's what needs to continue. I just wanted to tell you, I'm very glad to see you, very glad to see you're still engaged, and want to thank you for all your service and what you did to address some of the affordable housing that we're still pursuing here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Butler. Any further questions for Ms. Klein?
I just want to say thank you, Commissioner, for coming. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you, Representative Butler. Very good to see you again.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Pardon me. Next person I have on the list is James Sprung. I don't see James Sprung, so I will go on to Melissa Linden. Maybe a quicker night than we thought. Sean Gio, who I did see.
Hi, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, Melissa Linden. Yep, you're up. Please proceed.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, I'm coming here today just in reference to, I'm sure you guys have fabulous programs with chat and all this, but you need to do accountability. My mother's house has been through all your like affordable housing programs, and it's so much fraud surrounding it, and nobody does anything. And there's the money within your state and in these programs to do something. And now that fraud's trickled into my life, and it shouldn't be. Your towns are infested with it and everything. You, the housing committee and the banking commission collected a settlement on household realty. You put the rights in federal court, and then you still let us be aggrieved by household realty in these banks like HSBC and Blackwater and everything. My background is from my family being on Wall Street. My brother works for Finnier. My mom was licensed up the Ying. So you're not going to tell me that Affordable Housing Committee and Richard Bloomingfall's programs like Connecticut Unite and the foreclosure moratorium program are acting any benefit to our Connecticut constituents. There needs to be complete accountability. The money's there to do it. And I believe that gentleman in the Adidas tracksuit was going there to all these town reps who come in asking you, he's like, what have you guys done? He's on the right track. Whoever that is, he's on the right track because he's like, you know what, and I see you guys, you're like, we put the programs in there. You know what, you need to make all these people accountable because they use the same lawyers, the same corrupt clerks, the same everything to pass and steal our homes and take our affordable housing away. It's really seriously problem. And like that widow said, the system is broken. We cannot trust our government anymore because you steal our home. You give them to BlackRock and you get them tied up with Eversource and or Evergrande and all that. And one day when that falls, we're going to fall. And you as representatives need to start making accountability for the fraud. Look at my mom's case. My name is Melissa Linden. Look at what the courts have done. Your judges are rogue. All your like program little people who you go into in HUD, rogue, all of them. Lawyers like McCullough, Shearson, Shipman and Goodman stole my mother's property by using a bunk power of attorney that was deemed fraudulent in a federal court and passed it with a water company on a fake foreclosure and an affidavit.
I'm sorry, Melissa. I don't want to
to
cut you off, Melissa. I just want to just make sure that we are staying on topic of the.
Yeah, no, it's for the accountability. I want you to put accountability in your bill, accountability for your program.
Are there
have
any
none.
questions for Melissa?
So go look in the court. I'm sure there's none because it's about fraud. Like every other committee, you have so many for other people, but when it comes to fraud, you guys don't want to know. Look at the cases because I'm going to make this state accountable. I'm in it for the long haul. So I am going to be on every news. I'm going to take it from here to federal. You got problems with your banks, your financial, your program, Chat, HUD, Unite, all of it. All of it. 80,000 people were like, I'm not even knowing your numbers, but 80% of the applications were denied. That program's not utilizing anybody. And if you think it is, you're very skewed. The amount of technology fraud and manipulation by your employees is really sick. Go look at my cases. It's been told to you, and it's sat like this for 10 years. So I thank you for listening, and I wish you the best rest of the day. And good luck to that guy in the, Adidas tracksuit. I think you're on your way. Make them accountable.
All right, thank you, Ms. Linden for your testimony. I have to agree with you. I love Representative Paletto's tracksuit.
It is a great tracksuit.
Actually stylish, yes. Very stylish.
And Ms. Linden, I did put my email address in the chat. So if you feel free to reach out to me, and I would love to contact you and get more information.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great headphones too.
Feel so good about myself.
All right. Now we're up to Sean Gio, please.
Thanks, Senator Lopes. As you said, my name's Sean Gio. I'm Policy Director of Partnership for Strong Communities. Thanks for the opportunity to express my concerns with SB 169. The partnership supports policies that strengthen Section 830G to create affordable housing more easily across the state. Section 830G does exactly what it's intended to do. And the failure of Connecticut to affordably house our residents lies elsewhere. I want to just begin by stating some affordable housing facts in Connecticut. Statewide, more than 200,000 Connecticut households spend more than half of their income on housing costs. That's not something we've been hearing a lot about today. And affordable housing in Connecticut is incredibly concentrated in Fairfield County, and it was that way in 1990 and remains that way. And that is not as a result of failure of 830G. In Fairfield County, for instance, from 2002 to 21, there were 5,813 new affordable housing units as counted by the state. 4,100 of those were in 4 communities: Stamford, Bridgeport, Norwalk, and Danbury. Those are the facts. So Section 830G, through its 30% set-aside program, is Connecticut's only state tool to grow our supply of affordable housing without expending state funding. And it's succeeded by creating thousands of affordable homes that are distributed more broadly across the state. So to the extent that our affordable supply is not entirely concentrated in a few communities, Section 830G does a lot of that work. And I'll try. I know you're pressed for time, so I'll move forward and just say Section 830G means a town cannot avoid affordable housing development by simply zoning it out or by saying we don't need any more housing. Section 830G has been in place for 32 years. Towns have had 32 years to plan and zone for affordable housing development outside of 830G developments. Since 2000, the legislature amended the statute, and towns have had the ability to work toward a 4-year moratorium from that law. This is not a new occurrence. This law has been in place for a very long time. Towns have had multiple generations at this point to try to plan for expanding affordable housing in our state to try to address the needs of over 200,000 families that are spending more than half of their income on housing, access to jobs. I just want to say Section 830G is a very essential component of housing policy. And as you've heard from Representative Lamar, it was never intended to be the entire policy for housing. It's one tool. We need more tools. We need expanded rental assistance programs. We need more funding for affordable housing construction. And fundamentally, we need land use reforms to allow denser, smaller, more affordable housing to be built in communities across the state. Weakening Section 830G would move the state further away from affordably housing its residents at a time of growing need. Thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Guillaume. I see a question from Representative Zullo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Guillaume, for your testimony. Did you say 50% or over 200,000 homes or households spend more than 50% on housing costs?
That's right. Yes.
What counts? Do taxes, like if you own a home, do taxes count as a housing cost?
I believe, well, it's certainly for mortgage holders, yes. I think it's the entire cost, housing costs, but there may be other speakers that could correct me around home ownership. But it's how I know utilities are included. That those numbers come from the U.S. Census.
I'm just curious because, I mean, when you do the math, 4% on a $100,000 loan is the same today as it was in 1990. But taxes today are certainly not the same as they were in 1990. And I'm just curious as to how much of the additional cost or housing burden is due to the increase in property taxes in the state, as opposed to the actual increase in housing costs. And you may not have that figure, but maybe, for people who are listening who may be able to weigh in as well. I'm just curious because, certainly we want to look for new and novel solutions and continue to encourage affordable housing, but maybe we also have to get at the, other roots of the problem. We probably need tax reform. If we want to make housing more affordable, let's find a way to lower the property tax burden so that we can bring rents down, so that we can make these houses more affordable for homeowners. But I mean, maybe again, we'll hear from somebody else who can testify to that. But again, I appreciate that. That is a staggering statistic.
Representative, just for your information, the split between renters and homeowners, it's a little of that 200,000. More than 100,000 I think it's about 130,000 are renters, but there is still a sizable number that are homeowners.
I mean, the taxes are still, they're just they're baked into the rent. I mean, rent is just a direct reflection of the overall landlord's costs. So, I mean, taxes are relevant whether you're a renter or a homeowner. In fact, it might even be more relevant because every time you're taking into account a tax increase, you're building in an additional cushion as a landlord. As a homeowner, you're just paying and budgeting dollar for dollar. So interesting to look into, but I appreciate the testimony. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Zullo. Any other further questions for Mr. Gio? Being none, thank you very much. Did you submit written testimony for this?
I did, yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you,
I
Senator.
appreciate it. And have a good day. Say hi to your brother.
I will do that. Thank you, Senator.
Still cracks me up. All right. Next, I see Betsy Guerra.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Betsy Guerra. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Council of Small Towns, and I'm here to support Senate Bill 169 and act concerning a study of the effect of affordable housing policies. I always think it's a good idea to take a longer look at a program that's been on the books for some time. I do agree with Sean Gee that the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Procedure has been an effective tool in supporting the development of about 15,000 affordable housing units throughout Connecticut. But we do hear concerns from some of our small towns that because it's very lucrative for them, for developers to build in their community, that they feel that it's a tool that's being used in their town to overbuild because of the 70% of units that they can then sell at above market rate, or not above market rate, but not as an affordable rate. Because as you know, under the set aside program, they only have to set aside 30% of the units at affordable housing rates. So I think it's a valid question. Not sure whether or not there is data to indicate whether that program has been used to a larger extent in certain communities as opposed to others. I know in certain areas of the state, I have small towns that question why anybody cares about 830G. They haven't heard of it in their town. They haven't had developers come in and try to implement or develop affordable housing programs because of that. So again, I think it's worth looking at that. I think it's worth looking at some of the other states' housing programs to see how effective they have been in addressing the state and municipal affordable housing needs. I do want to point out that under Public Act 17-171, which allows certain towns to obtain a moratorium from the Affordable Housing Appeals Procedure, that there are certain provisions that actually sunset as of October 1st, 2022. And I don't know the extent to which towns are relying on those provisions in order to obtain a moratorium, but I believe the committee should look at that to determine whether those provisions should be extended. And they include features such as a lower housing unit equivalent point requirement, changes in how bonus HUE points are calculated, and other provisions. I also want to point out that we do have a lot of towns that have done the math with respect to the 10% affordable housing threshold. And based on the available number of building lots in their community, there's no way if they built affordable housing on every single available building lot that they would be able to meet that 10% threshold. So I do think we need to look at that and see whether there's a way to provide a more flexible or more realistic housing threshold for the state. And maybe it is not a one size fits all 10% housing affordable housing threshold. The other issue I do want to speak to with respect to the affordable housing plans, this is a multi-step process. We have a number of towns that are striving to implement the plans. Part of that involved doing a housing assessment.
Betsy, if you could please wrap up, you're at your 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Paletta, please proceed.
Thank you so much. Did you say, ma'am, you were with the Council of Small Towns cost?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and I guess I have a very quick question for you. There were a number of zoning proposals put forth, and I think we also had a couple of proposals put forth at our last hearing. Was the Council of Small Towns, it was articulated to us that the Council of Small Towns was in favor of the zoning bills and the bills that we see before us here today.
last session. Were you involved with cost last year?
Yes, I've been involved with cost for a while, so I don't know which bills in particular you're speaking.
Well, actually, to be fair, it's really not the one we're talking about today, but I thought while you were on here, I could ask you because I know that you've expressed some concern about this particular 830G issue, which is certainly of interest to me as well. And I think you heard me speak before in that we should try to bring towns together and at least, have some sort of conformity and get to an agreement on this bill. But there was also another bill, and I guess, we'll connect offline because in the interest of time, but we had heard it last 2 days ago in the public hearing, and it was articulated that cost was in favor of a zoning bill that had passed out of committee last year. And I thought you were opposed to it.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So I actually did submit testimony. Unfortunately, due to my apparently failing eyesight, I sent it to the Human Services Committee instead of the Housing Committee. So I have forwarded that to the clerk. You might be speaking to the bill regarding housing authority jurisdiction.
Yes, exactly.
And we are actually comfortable with the version that is before the committee now, because it does require that the municipality in the expanded area of operation has to approve.
Right. Thank you. And that's kind of what the crux of it was with that provision in there. I knew that you were in favor of it, but then there was also some talk about removing that provision, which I'm sure if we remove that provision, then you'd be opposed to it. So, all right, thank you so much. That's all I had. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for asking a question about a prior public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not a problem. I don't have to be anywhere tonight early.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate that clarification, but I do think there was a slight misunderstanding, Representative. If I remember correctly, the person that you were talking to was about CCM, not cost. Those two different organizations, just for clarification. But in order to move on, was there any other questions for Director Guerra? Seeing none, once again, thank you for your leadership in cost.
Thank you, Representative. Take care.
Next up, I have Alma Rutgers.
Yes. Senator Lopes, Representative Williams, Senator Chicarella, Representative Coletta, and members of the committee. I'm Alma Rutgers. Although I wear and have worn various hats over the years, I'm speaking today as an individual and longtime Greenwich resident. I have serious concerns that those who support SB 169 intend to use it as a vehicle for the dismantling of affordable housing legislation that has been enormously effective for more than 3 decades. In one of my previous hats, I advocated for the 1989 enactment of what's become known as 8-30G. This legislation was intended as a market-driven affordable housing initiative to break through what were then insurmountable exclusionary zoning barriers throughout most of the state. It has been and continues to be a successful initiative. Thousands of affordable units have been produced that would not otherwise exist. This legislation was never intended as a state mandate that every Connecticut municipality have 10% of housing units affordable. It was intended to produce affordable housing where zoning did not allow for such housing. The 10% exemption threshold was only to direct the market forces away from municipalities that had already done their fair share. The fact that the 10% has been widely misinterpreted, however, has helped the cause of affordable housing to the extent that municipalities strive toward that threshold. Subsequent amendments, and this is the most important thing, allowing for exemptions through moratoria have further incentivized the development of affordable housing. The legislation has been and continues to be successful in doing what it was intended to do. I see no need for a study that will open the door and invite in those who would eviscerate this important tool in the affordable housing kit. This bill should not be voted out of committee, and I thank you for the time that you've given me.
Thank you very much for sharing your time. Any questions for Ms. Rutgers? Seeing none, thank you very much. Did you submit written testimony?
I did pretty much
Wonderful.
the same thing that I just read.
Yeah, so I should be able to look it up easily, but when I'm on the Zoom, I get very confused. So I'll get to it after we get off. All right, thank you. Next I have Jordan Force.
Oh, hi. My name's Sean Force. I live in Stamford, Connecticut, and I was born and raised in Greenwich. So this is respect to the 830G study proposed bill. So I'll talk about the proposed bill and then my views on 830G. So actually in the beginning, I was going to say that I neither oppose nor support this bill. But now I think after hearing that most of the people who are supporting it seem to also be opposed to 830G in general, at least from what I've observed, I'd have to lean against it. But, you know, it is calling for a study, and that's always valuable, of course, to get experts involved and, you know, gather information about a piece of legislation that's been around since 1989. I will say that I think this bill, maybe this is intentional. Maybe bills like this are normally like this, but it seems a little vague. Like if you have this legislation, if I were a legislature, I'd probably have some specific questions about what the effects of it have been, and I'd want to, you know, have those answered directly. So as far as 830G itself, I'd say I support 830G. Having grown up in Greenwich, I can tell you that, you know, the vast majority of houses there are large single family, very expensive homes. And I don't expect 830G to do magic. It is a market-based solution, but it has its place. And you know, my basic view is that if you're a town, if you're Greenwich or Fairfield, and you don't want a developer to be able to come in and, you know, override your zoning rules, then make sure you get to that 10% deed restricted affordable housing. That deed restricted part, I think, being important because, you know, even if market forces drive up market rates, the fact that it's deed restricted affordable is a buffer against that. So yeah, I support 830G. I lean towards opposing this bill, but I think I could be persuaded otherwise if it was more specific.
Thank you very much, Mr. Force. I think sometimes, yeah, in our legislative process, there's a weird language in this building where we bring out a bill that's somewhat vague on purpose so that we can spark testimony and spark discussion and people can share ideas from all different angles, and we don't want to go into it with a preconceived notion. But I appreciate your comments. And are there any questions for Mr. Force? Seeing none, thank you. And is that a TARDIS in the background?
No. Oh wait, yeah, it is.
Nice piece of decoration. I appreciate it. All right, next up on the list, I have Anika Singh Lamar.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you to the Housing Committee for the opportunity to testify today. You have my written testimony, so I will try to be brief. First, we are in a perpetual affordable housing crisis, and we cannot afford to unwind or weaken a tool that has resulted in thousands of units in towns that, by their own admission, never would have permitted those units otherwise. People don't live in housing plans. People don't live in the good intentions of hyper-wealthy McMansion owners or the planners who carry their bags. People live in housing. 830G creates housing, full stop. Second, in response to a back and forth a few minutes ago, yes, housing prices have gone up since 1990, and the cause is scarcity, not taxes. I'm happy to share the charts after today's meeting. Look, widely disparate mill rates are a big problem, but no, Greenwich's 11 mill rate didn't cause its housing affordability crisis. And in higher tax towns, the tax burden gets capitalized into the price. They actually don't raise the price. The taxes aren't the cause of the housing crisis. Second, I heard from the senator from Greenwich that 830G is demoralizing to our towns. I was not aware that our towns had feelings, but I will tell you that people do. You know what's demoralizing to human beings? not being able to afford to house your family in safe, secure housing. And the people who live in the thousands of units created by 830G at no expense to the state tax dollars feel relieved to be paying a rental amount that is affordable to them, that allows them to spend their household income on other essential needs, including saving for the home ownership that others have mentioned. Third, I heard from the representative from Fairfield that 830G permits developers to build in places where people want to live and where there is existing infrastructure. That is exactly right, and it is a very good reason not to touch 830G. Fourth, I direct you to Alma Rucker's written testimony of the 10% question. She just spoke to you. I won't repeat her. She's 100% right on what the 10% number represents and what it does. Fifth, you've heard lies about how the 830G numbers are calculated. Elderly housing counts, housing built before 1990 counts. I gather people are disingenuously referring to the moratorium process, and I'm happy to answer questions about the moratorium process if you'd like, or anything else. I have been involved in 830G litigation myself on behalf of not a for-profit developer, but a local housing authority. Happy to talk about that experience as well. But otherwise, thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lamar. I see a question from Senator Anwar.
Thank you so much, Professor Lamar. Thank you for the work that you've been doing all these years. Could you tell us about a little bit about the moratorium process, if you could, please?
Yeah, so the moratorium process allows a town that has demonstrated progress. So towns going into a 2000 Blue Ribbon Commission looking at 830G said, look, 10% is such a big number that if we're right now at less than 1%, how are we ever going to get there? And said, okay, well, that's not a crazy complaint. Let's create a process where if you show progress and you develop units, and particularly if you develop the kinds of units that inspire the worst NIMBYism, we will reward you for that. And you can have a moratorium from 830G, which is to say, for 4 years, you're not subject to an 830G lawsuit. And hopefully, the hope is that during those 4 years, you build another tranche of units and you qualify for another moratorium. So a town that in good faith in the year 2000 decided to go this route could have, let's say by 2005, built the first tranche. Between 2005 and 2009, built the second tranche, gotten a second moratorium. And over the course of say 20 years of sustained effort, working with developers, putting some public dollars in the way that our cities that actually care about affordable housing do, you can get to 10%, and you can do it over 20 years. Take all the time in the world. That was the idea behind the moratorium process. And some towns have taken the state up on it, and the vast majority simply have not.
Thank you so much. And Professor Lamar, one more question was affordable housing and its direct link with economic development in the community and the region. Yeah. And then that's your area that you've written about too.
Yeah. So I served on back in 2015, the legislature convened a panel on tax policy, and the state spent $500,000, $500,000, not on me, on a slate of economists to come and consult the state on how to make our tax policy more competitive. And I recall, and I'm happy to send people the report, there are all these reports from different economists, and the person who came to talk to us about changes that you make to your tax policy to make your state more competitive basically said, look, there's no empirical research showing that you can dramatically change your state's economic future by making small changes to tax rates. Corporations that are looking to where to locate, workers who are looking where to live, there's too many other factors that inform where they decide to go to hang your hat on tax rates. But look, Connecticut, that's okay, because I have really good news. You're a place that is actually really attractive to a lot of employers, as evidenced by the rich universe of employers we have here. And you're really attractive to educated workers. So what you should do is you should lead into your strengths. And one of the things they mentioned was just our location and between New York and Boston, and the fact that New York and Boston are really high housing cost places. So if we could do something about our zoning, we could dramatically improve Connecticut's economic prospects. because we could be welcoming to young families and workers, the kinds of people who moved here back when housing was cheaper in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. The onslaught of exclusionary zoning in Connecticut starts late 60s, early 70s. You don't see it hit the kind of economic impact for a while because there's still this kind of like suburban tract style housing happening through the 80s that is you still see enough like housing supply increase, and then housing supply just comes to a halt. He was 100% right, and we all kind of laughed because we knew that the legislature would never do anything about it. But at least let's try not to do any harm. We shoot ourselves in the foot with our zoning. I talk about it in my written testimony with a bunch of cites and footnotes to economists on the left and the right. And, you know, I'm more than happy to talk about it at length and provide citations as I do in my written testimony. But the fact of the matter is that we shoot ourselves in the foot with our crazy exclusionary zoning in an incredibly economically competitive corner of our state, as well as the remainder of the 95-91 corridors.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for the work that you do. And I completely agree with you that Connecticut's not been able to unleash its full potential without addressing this very basic issue. And the fear and the hysteria is truly unwarranted. It actually is harming the interests of all the people, the ones who are successful and the ones who are on their way to be successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Problem. Representative Zullo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the testimony. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the tax policy? Because I had asked the question about taxes, and I'm going to qualify by saying that, would you agree that the goal is to get everybody below 30% housing cost, spending 30% of their, you know, their income or whatever household income on housing costs?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the goal, right? And I assume taxes are included in that, right?
Yeah.
So if taxes continue to go up, so isn't that a root problem? Shouldn't we be addressing that as well?
I'm not disagreeing that we should address it. I think that we should have a statewide mill rate, and Greenwich should pay its fair share, helping the rest of the towns to meet their budgetary requirements so that East Haven doesn't have to go up into the 30s. I don't disagree with you that property taxes are a problem. I was making a more fundamental economic point, which is that if you look at the increase in absolute increase, correcting for inflation, housing prices in the last 30 years, which you will see. I mean, you can Google this and 17 different Federal Reserve Bank maps charts will pop up. There's an absolute increase, right? Between the median housing cost in 1990 and today. It's higher than inflation. And that can't be explained by property taxes because taxes get capitalized into the value of your home. So if your taxes are high, you will pay less for a house. So it brings down the cost. The initial cost, it doesn't bring down the cost of owning it, but it brings down the cost of acquiring it. So all I was saying is that the property taxes can't explain that. And one kind of very, I think, obvious way to understand that that's true is that Greenwich has a mill rate of 11 and their housing is not cheap. So it's not to say that property taxes aren't a problem. Property taxes are a big, stinking problem. And I wish there were more political appetite to deal with them, but they're not the problem we're talking about today. They're almost irrelevant.
So you're telling me the housing prices have gone up faster than inflation?
Yes.
Okay.
It's because of scarcity, is because we don't build anything anymore. This country basically stopped building housing in 1980, and it's because of zoning.
Well, I would agree with you that even affordable housing, we haven't built a whole lot of it. If you actually look at the affordable housing appeals list, of course, if you only go by that list, we've actually only generated about 10,000 new units over the last 20 years.
Well, remember that units go on and units come off. So the original 830G statute required an affordability of 20 years. So those units didn't disappear, they're just no longer on the list, right? If you built in 1995, you came off the list in 2015, but the unit still exists and it's still serving a household that is paying less than the average home in Fairfield, right? Even the 70% of units that are, market rate, these like evil market rate units are still cheaper than the average home in Fairfield, which by the way, they were also built by evil private developers, over the course of the last 100 years. I think you and I can probably see eye to eye on the politics that just because the private sector builds something doesn't mean it's evil. But yeah, no, I mean, you're right. We don't, the cost of building subsidized housing. So one might reasonably ask, I don't want my affordable housing to be built by the private sector. I want it to be built by the public sector. And there are people who say that. I mean, that's a legitimate policy perspective. It costs gazillions of dollars, like gobs of dollars. Publicly constructed housing is really expensive. So I agree with you that we haven't built enough affordable housing. We haven't built enough market housing. We need to build more of all of it. The thing that we don't need to do is build less of it. And the folks who are in favor of this bill want us to build less of it and do not have a strategy to build more of it.
So can you just elaborate on towns coming off the affordable housing, units coming off the affordable housing appeals list? You said that they come off the list. What would trigger coming off the list? Like a deed restriction expiring or something like that? The deed restriction
expires. There are also units that come off the list because a town redevelops existing housing. So you see this in the number of those Fairfield County towns, right? They'll take an existing housing development, tear that one down and build up a new one. So the units that get torn down come off the list. The new units go on. I mean, don't get me wrong, but that's another place where you might see units coming off. The other is expiring deed restrictions.
So that doesn't just affect the moratorium points. That affects the affordable. That affects your eligibility for the burden shifting under the statute, right?
Yeah, sure. If units come off, units come off.
So I mean, I just want to qualify. I don't think that people are speaking disingenuously when they're saying units built before 1990. I think they're correlating that to that a lot of people have 30-year deed restrictions, and that a lot of those deed restrictions are expiring right now. They expire.
That's not what they're talking about. No, I mean, expiring use is like a legitimate field and a legitimate subject of conversation in the affordable housing field. That's not what they're talking about. It's like, I just want to be very clear that you know, there's a sort of certain chance because they'll say it in the same breath. They'll say elderly doesn't count. What? That's just not true, right? An affordable elderly unit counts towards your 10%. So I just want to be very clear. People have muddied the waters with a whole bunch of talking points that they throw out. The elderly are being discriminated against. That's just not true. Housing built before 1990 doesn't count. That's not true. I mean, if your deed restriction is no longer in place in the year 2022, yeah, then obviously it doesn't count. But it's not because it was built before 1990. When New Haven and Hartford are up 30%, our housing stock wasn't all built in the last 30 years. Most of those units are pre-1990 units, I would venture to say. You know, maybe they've been redeveloped or refurbished, but they were all built before 1990 for the most part.
So I don't know, I kind of find that's both sides of it. You're saying it's falling off, so it doesn't count, but it doesn't count. That's the whole point. Is I'm losing numbers on my affordable housing appeals list every year as deed restrictions expire.
So build more. I mean, so what we do in New Haven is we put public subsidy into extending it. That's what you do. I mean, that's how these things work. That's how, if your town cares that you're losing an affordable unit, put public subsidy into extending the requirement. That's what we do.
A lot of ours are done by private developers.
Okay, so offer them a subsidy to extend it or build more. I mean, I guess I just don't. So you heard the testimony, right? Two people before me, right? Like the 10% is not a goal. The 10% is a, gosh, like this is what 830G says. It says affordable housing is really important. And we don't want a local zoning regulation to prohibit it unless health and safety are at stake. Full stop. And then it says, but look, there are a lot of towns in the state that do more than their share. They are doing more than their part. They brought breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert to the stinking potluck. They did that already. So we won't do this to them because they're doing their part already. And if your town's not doing its part, go back to your kitchen and make some dinner and then come back to my potluck. And between now and then, I don't know, cry more.
I guess my issue is just that here in East Haven, you know, I think it was the last revaluation, we had 4,300 homes that were under $170,000 as an appraised value. I mean, that's a stark affordability number. If you plug that number into just about any affordable housing formula for any affordable housing development, you're going to say that unit's affordable. but we don't get credit for that because they're not deed restricted. They don't have a CHFA mortgage. You know, they're not USDA. They're not subsidized, but they're affordable.
Okay.
So I mean, that's where I see a problem, is that you're saying that I'm not coming to the potluck with anything. I'm coming to the potluck with 40% of my housing stock, which would generally be considered affordable. It's just that 830G is asking for only one solution. And I'm saying
not true. It is one, 830G is one solution of many. Back, you know, I haven't read the 1989 Blue Ribbon Commission report in some time, but everyone should go back and read it because it puts out a menu of options, including, for example, decreasing minimum lot sizes in our towns, right? Like, there are a lot of things that Connecticut ought to be doing if we actually cared about those people who are not eating tonight because the rent eats first. We don't do those things. We have this one thing. And upshot is that there are hundreds of units that are going to be built in Greenwich in the next couple of years as a result of it. Why would we not keep that tool? It doesn't make any sense. Now, yeah, the 10% only applies to deed restricted. That's right. And if you want to include the units that are naturally affordable, then you're going to have to up that percentage to 80 or 90%, because no healthy economy ought to have housing units that are unaffordable and consider that to be the default. The default ought to be naturally affordable, not 10% naturally affordable. So if you want to count those units, I am all for it. Change the percentage to 90%.
I actually thought of a hybrid where if you have a certain percentage of naturally occurring affordable, then the number under 8-30G would change. So that rather than needing 10%, maybe you would only need 8%. Listen, we could go back.
Yeah, I mean, I would be open to having that conversation over a beer or over coffee or something. Like, I do think that's a longer conversation, and I don't think it's crazy. You know, Rep. D'Agostino had a bill a few years ago that similarly looked at pre-introduced school lunch rates, and I was like, you know what? I don't like opening the door to 830G reform because there's too many bad actors and too many people operating in bad faith. But if somebody's got like a legitimate bill like his, and what you just said doesn't sound crazy to me, like, let's talk. That's fine. But let's also acknowledge that you and I could draft that bill. You could introduce it next year, and everybody who amended it would amend it to make sure that another poor person never moved into the town of Fairfield.
Listen, I don't want to monopolize. I feel like we're both monopolizing this public hearing, and I don't want to do that. But I really do appreciate your enthusiasm and your wealth of knowledge on it. And I will absolutely take you up on that offer for a beer or a coffee, and we can talk about some legitimate aims for some possibilities.
Sounds good. That sounds great.
Thank you very much for your expertise and for your enthusiasm.
So with that, I hope that I am invited to that coffee or beer too. I don't drink coffee. I have way too much caffeine in my diet.
You're willing to come down to East Haven, you know, Representative Williams. Yeah.
I will go in a second.
Shack or something. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm pretty sure my former chiropractor was in East Haven, if I remember correctly. But I do see, as fellow educators, I do think there is room for additional knowledge for us all. So I would love to work with the ranking member, Representative Paluto, to come up with a list of folks that can be on a panel to share, to make sure that we are all on the same page about the facts of 830G, about what it says, what it doesn't say, what towns can do to achieve the goals. Some of the math, I think there's a lot of math that comes about what equals 10% and how that number changes. I would love to be able to work with Representative Paletta on getting that list together. So I will make sure I reach out soon, and hopefully you could be one of the panelists and other experts too. So Paletta, I'll be reaching out to make sure that we do that. But thank you for your testimony. Are there any other questions for Professor Lamar?
I was just going to add on that I think the point in my career where it just seems like we're reinventing the wheel. Like, we put this to bed a couple of years ago, and I felt that most people had a good handle on it when I was a young legislator. And it just seems like we're coming back to the same arguments again. So we do have more work. I'm happy we ended up doing this hearing, because I am still stunned by it is some of the newer legislators who just are against this, but don't really seem to understand what 830G is, and it's disheartening. But we can get cracking on that. But thank you very much, Anika.
Thank you.
See you.
Okay.
Any further questions? Being none, we're going to move on to Erin Kemple.
Hi, I'm Erin Kemple. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, and really, really intimidated to go after that really great exchange and passing on of information. What I wanted to do today is to talk about the fair housing implications of 830G and the proposed bill. And by that, I mean that we need to recognize that Connecticut is one of the most segregated states in the country. Despite increased racial diversity when measured statewide, people of color remain highly segregated in the state's urban municipalities. In fact, Connecticut is one of the 15 most segregated states in the country and is more segregated than several southern states, including Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. In addition, Connecticut is the most segregated state in New England. Unfortunately, racial and ethnic segregation follow the patterns of historic investment in housing and infrastructure that largely excluded people of color from the suburbs and locked them into cities. And that phenomenon continues today, to the point where 73% of people who identify as non-white live in only 22 municipalities. One of the reasons for that is that as a result of income and wealth disparities, Blacks, Latinx, women, single parent families, and people with disabilities, as well as people with a lawful source of income other than employment, have a disproportionate need for affordable housing. In order to promote integration, we need to increase the supply of affordable housing and locate it in communities throughout the state in order to also promote integration and alleviate income and wealth gaps. While the purpose of this bill is to study the effects of the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals procedure, it is in reality an effort by the opponents of affordable housing to weaken the one tool that Connecticut has to create such housing in some of Connecticut's wealthiest and least diverse cities. As those who support this bill have testified, the study is not an attempt to strengthen the statute. They've made it clear it is an attempt to fix the statute, to look for data that supports their view that 830G overrules local control and imposes affordable housing quotas on towns. Such opposition misunderstands the plain meaning of the statute, as we just heard from Professor Singh Lamar. There's no need to study these erroneous and misleading interpretations. Alternatively, people have expressed a need for a study because the law has been on the books since 1989 and is not working. As a civil rights practitioner for my entire career, I can tell you that the civil rights laws have been on the books since at least 1868.
You're at your 3 minutes, so please summarize.
Thank you. And we're not studying it. And I urge you not to study what is a bill that is working for the cities and towns who want to improve their affordable housing stock. Thank you, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Are there any questions for Aaron? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is John G.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can the committee hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I'm in a car. I had to leave one town hall and get to another, so I'm on the road. My name's John Guskowski. I'm a professional planner. I am the co-chair of the Government Relations Committee of the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association. Our association represents over 400 professional planners, attorneys, landscape architects, and land use practitioners in the state of Connecticut. We've submitted written testimony on this bill. And our position is, should the bill as drafted be taken in good faith, and the efforts to study 830G are indeed to make affordable housing better and more attainable in Connecticut, then in general, we would support that written intent. However, as the previous speaker, Aaron Kempel, and others have made clear, the intent behind drafting this legislation is to effectively gut or dismantle 830G, which we do not support. 830G is one of, if not the only state tool that has been effective over the last 3 decades in encouraging and in fact requiring affordable housing to be built in some of our most segregated towns and cities. The problem is not that this 830G is broken, but that it is working and that there are not enough additional tools and not enough additional inducements for towns to get much more active in facing this very real problem. So we would encourage, instead of the study, that this housing committee and the state and municipalities get much more active and get much more serious about doing things to address the very real affordable housing crisis in Connecticut, so that all the attention will not be on 830G. And the only option we have is talking about how good or bad it is, that there will be a much broader range of other options. And that is where we believe the legislature and towns should be spending their efforts. And a number of towns are working on affordable housing plans as we speak. We hope that that is the beginning of a process, not the end of a process. And communities need much more options and need to become far more serious and far more proactive than they have been. And dismantling 830G is going in the wrong direction. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions for John? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, John.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Darby Hudgens.
Good
is our next
afternoon.
speaker.
No,
And
that's
please forgive me
okay.
for just skipping your first name. I apologize.
No, that's all right. Good afternoon, Senator Loeb, Senator Anwar, Representative Williams and Smith. My name is Fanula Darby Hudgens, and I'm the Director of Operations with the Connecticut Fair Housing Center. And I thank you so much for allowing me to provide testimony today. So a lot of my colleagues who testified before me and some of the representatives on this call, including Senator Loeb, have referenced history. And I can't help but go back to the first time I testified in the legislature. I was a senior at Trinity College, and it was exactly 10 years ago. And I testified on exactly how exclusionary zoning was prohibiting the development of affordable housing in Connecticut. And so to think that 10 years later, I'm still having this same conversation, and I've spent my entire professional career doing so, shows that we are still having the same conversations, and shows that folks don't truly understand the intentions of 830G. And so I oppose Senate Bill 169 for really 3 very clear reasons. And the first is that the request for inquiry into 830G does not demonstrate an understanding of the affordable land use appeals procedure, as my colleagues have explained before me. The second is the inquiry does not represent or demonstrate an understanding of Connecticut's extreme racial segregation and current affordable housing crisis. And finally, the request is duplicative of research already completed and research and inquiry that continues as a result of last year's passage of Housing Bill 6107, an act that reorganizes the Zoning Enabling Act that created a committee to investigate affordable housing, for a meeting that I am now late for because I serve on that committee. And so just to touch on those points, 830G is not a mechanism that requires towns to develop a minimum amount of affordable housing. It's simply an appeals procedure for developers when a proposed development is denied in a town that has prohibitively exclusionary zoning. The other thing that I can't help but to address as a fair housing advocate, and the point that I really want to make clear here for all of you today, is that decades of discriminatory land use and housing policies have made Connecticut one of the most racially segregated states in the country and have limited housing opportunities for people of color. It's embedded into the state's legacy to do so. And so as a result, today in 2022 in Connecticut, people of color rent their homes almost 2 to 1 when compared to white people. The segregation of housing by type and tenancy along race lines means that folks commonly racialize the term affordable housing as housing for people of color. So when we have rhetoric and attempts to prohibit, stop, or dissuade or block the development of affordable rental units, it's simply racist because of who needs affordable housing most in this state. Finally, there was a study commissioned by the Department of Housing that was just completed in 2020 that suggests we need 86,000 units of affordable housing in this state. To suggest that we do anything to the single tool we have to promote affordable housing development when the need is 86,000 units is simply suggesting that the fear we've all been dancing for is another form of racism. Finally, we know that 830G works. A study that came out of the Partnership for Strong Communities suggests that restricted affordable housing units have increased by 150% in the last 19 years, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for our latest speaker? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much for allowing me to testify today.
Nick A.
That's me. Hi, my name is Nick Abbott. I'm a lifelong Greenwich resident, and I'm testifying in opposition to SB 169. I love my hometown of Greenwich, and it is that love of my town that makes me a strong proponent of 830G, because it provides the only way to build multifamily housing in town, the only way many seniors, low and middle income families, and young people like me could ever afford to live there. Greenwich officials, including some on this call, say, trust us, we don't need 830G to build affordable housing, but their record is anything but trustworthy. Greenwich bans multifamily housing on 98% of its land. Just 5 years ago, Greenwich cut by 50% the total land area on which multifamily housing was allowed. And in the late 90s, the town blocked its own housing authority from building a 92-unit affordable housing complex. I credit Rep. Paletta for asking about what towns have actually done to build affordable housing, and the answers offered in this hearing are quite revealing. Senator Fazio and Rep. Meskers pointed to public housing complexes as evidence of Greenwich's willingness, but these were built in the 1940s. Average rents today in town are 4 times the inflation-adjusted average rent from that time. I'll say that again, 4 times the inflation-adjusted average. The town has permitted hardly any affordable housing or even multifamily housing at all in the past 30 years, accumulating only 35 housing unit equivalent points over 3 decades. This bill is a step in the wrong direction because it might limit 830G rather than building on the one tool we have to build multifamily housing and affordable housing in towns like Greenwich. The purported aim of this bill, studying affordable housing policies, can't be fulfilled by looking at 830G in isolation. Addressing Connecticut's affordable housing crisis by studying 830G alone would be like addressing a leak in one's roof by studying the bucket collecting rainwater. Even worse, the logic of this bill suggests that shrinking the size of the bucket, rather than patching up the roof, is the best way to solve the problem. 830G is best understood as one tool to increase housing supply and housing diversity, one that's practically limited by market forces. Requiring steep set-asides for affordable housing, far steeper than in the hottest real estate markets in the country, like San Francisco or New York City, make 830G developments difficult to finance and relatively rare. There have only been 5 ever approved in Greenwich. The only way in which 830G developments become more common in a particular town is if their housing market is seriously out of whack, meaning that the price of market rate units is so high that they will cross-subsidize the affordable units, which developers lose money on. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does show that 830G doesn't present some doomsday scenario. It's a necessary backstop, one that would be unnecessary if towns like Greenwich did the right thing and actually built multifamily housing and affordable housing. Greenwich needs 830G. Connecticut needs 830G. The state as a whole needs to be doing more, not less, to eliminate barriers to affordable housing. That's why I urge you to oppose this bill and instead support other pieces of legislation that tear down barriers to new housing in Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Are there any questions for Nick? Thank you, Nick, for your testimony. I think Alderman Eli Saban is next.
Good afternoon, Senator Lopes, Representative Williams, Senator Anwar, Representative Smith, Senator Ciccarella, Representative Paletta, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Eli Sabin, and I'm testifying today on behalf of Connecticut Voices for Children, a research-based advocacy organization working to ensure that one day Connecticut is a thriving and equitable state where all children achieve their full potential. Like many across our state, Connecticut Voices for Children is concerned about SB 169, which seems to take aim at Section 830G, which is a very important piece of our state's affordable housing policy. Over the years, 830G has helped produce thousands of units of housing that's affordable to working class people. Without Section 830G, thousands of working and middle class families would be pushed out of our state, forced to pay for a mortgage or rent they can't actually afford, or segregated into a few cities and towns that provide affordable places to live. 830G is about economic mobility, fairness, and the cost of living. Protecting 830G is an issue of justice. It's also fundamentally about what we want our state to look like in 5, 10, or 20 years. Do we want to continue fighting to make it more affordable for working people to live in Connecticut? Or do we want to prevent the construction of new affordable housing in our communities, forcing working families to make impossible choices or move to other states that are more welcoming? Our state's Zoning Enabling Act says that cities and towns should, quote, promote housing choice and economic diversity in housing, including housing for both low and moderate income households. 830G helps make this vision of affordability, choice, and fairness a reality. As Connecticut Voices for Children's recent report describes, half of all Connecticut residents are struggling to pay their daily expenses, including 77% of working class families, 70% of Latino families, 65% of Black families, and 62% of families with children. We cannot afford to abandon the real people and families behind these numbers, which is what we would be doing if the General Assembly weakened 830G. We cannot afford to undermine this important policy, which we need to continue creating affordable housing across our state for many years to come. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eli. Are there any questions for Eli?
No, just like to say thank you for your testimony, Eli.
Thank you, Senator and Representative.
Gail is next. Gail McNair.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little shaky.
Is this better?
Am I the only one that's hearing it incorrectly?
No. It's a poor connection, it seems like.
All right, we'll come back to you, Gail. Number 26 is, please forgive me, Tara R.
That would be me. Hi, guys. So Chairman Lopes, Chairman Williams, and esteemed members of the Housing Committee. Oh, Gail's back. Do you want me to stop? Do you want me to?
Tara, if you can continue going, because it still sounds like Gail's connection isn't good yet, and we'll go back to her after yours.
Okay.
I'll give her a 3 minutes to come back.
Okay. So my name is Tara Steary. I'm an appointed member of the RTM, member of the Town Board of Human Services, and a resident of the town of Greenwich. I'd like to state my objection to SB 169 as it is written per my written testimony submitted yesterday. In addition to my requested amendment submitted in writing, I'd actually like to add a comment, and that's to answer a couple of the questions that were posed earlier, one by Ranking Member Zullo in regards to the cost of litigation. I represent as a member of the RTM in District 7, a district that has over the past 14 months been inundated with 830G projects submitted by developers. And I want to point out something that supports Mrs. Guerra's comments earlier, that there are developers that are taking advantage of the statute, and to rebut Mr. Abbott's comments in regards to the rationale of those of us in Greenwich for seeking change for 830G. In Greenwich, there's currently 13 applications submitted for more than 700 new apartments, 1,100 new parking spaces, approximately only 210, which would be affordable. And by the way, not all of which would be at low income rates, but at the 80% level. As Representative Meskers already mentioned, most are one bedrooms, actually almost 60% are one bedroom apartments, which doesn't really help families that need affordable housing. In fact, a number of these 830G proposals that were actually resubmissions under different application types that were earlier rejected and are now being resubmitted under 830G, even larger projects than were originally proposed. But what 830 does do when developers are allowed to build is increase the denominator in the equation and not the numerator. I've had dozens of neighbors who are collecting funds and creating legal entities in order to fight these developments collectively. Some of these same neighbors have spent tens of thousands of dollars fighting earlier applications, all who've lost. There's a lot of confusion around 830G, and when someone only answers part of a question, as one of the earlier reps did, it doesn't help. For example, while it's my understanding that units built before 1990 count towards the overall number of aged affordable housing stock units, they don't count towards the town's ability to reach a moratorium because of the date in which progress was to be measured from. So I would ask, maybe we solve the problem by completely eliminating the use of 830G by private developers and limit its use to only housing authorities, such as was proposed by Professor Leeper. So I'm not new to understanding meeting the needs of the residents in Greenwich. I am on the Town Board of Human Services, as well as the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. And together with our department commissioner, my colleagues and I are involved in the evaluation and implementation to meet the needs of thousands of Greenwich residents on a daily basis, including housing. So I'm asking that we work together to actually do a study that makes sense, to understand the impact, to understand what has worked in the past and where we need to go in the future. I do not like the idea that we want to just punish those who did not do what they were supposed to do before. Now that we are here and where we are, we recognize as a town in
Your 3-minute mark, so please summarize.
In a bipartisan way that we have to do something, but 830G is not helping us do it at this time. Thank you for your consideration, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Representative Paletta.
Thank you, Representative Phipps, and thank you so much for your testimony, Tara. I would be interested to know whether or not you would be interested in participating in some sort of field trip to the area. We're hopefully going to get a bipartisan on the road, so to speak, show, so we can come down, actually visit a lot of areas around Connecticut, but certainly one that has been up for discussion is Fairfield County. So I'm hoping that you will stay engaged, because it seems like you have a lot of insightful information, as well as folks that testified before you. So with your permission, we will take your information and hopefully reach out to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, guys.
Let's try Gail again.
Is this better?
There we go, Gail. Your turn.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Lopez, Representative Williams, Senator Cicerella, hope I didn't murder his name, Representative Paletta, and members of the Housing Committee. My name is Gail McNair. I am the founding president of the Rose Center Incorporated, and I'm also a resident of the town of Hamden. I already submitted my written testimony, and I just want to, you can just review that testimony at your leisure. In addition to my testimony, I want to thank Senator Lopez for the clarification on the vagueness of SB 169. Going into this, as far as SB 169 is concerned, in Section 830G, I am coming in with mixed support. On one hand, as an advocate, I do not support I do support SB 169, primarily because I am echoing one of the previous testimonies by Melissa Linden as far as probing, because I initially saw it as more from an advocate context, that SB 169 would be like a probing into how different policies such as Section 830G is being administered, but it also probe into the overall housing industry in the state of Connecticut. And based on personal and professional advocacies and personal and professional experiences, I truly believe and echo, like I said, her sentiments that this state is just wrought with a whole lot of fraud, and a lot of probing and investigations need to go into how we're doing business and how the contractors or the providers that are providing services across the whole gamut are bringing those services, especially to the marginalized community and low and middle income families. I appreciate the insights that has been given from everybody thus far. And I basically, up until this point, for the past 25, 30 years, have been more so coming from an advocacy base, and I'm just now entering in the community and economic development side of it, hence my affiliation with LISC, the Livable Initiative Serves Support Communities, and the Partnership for Stronger Communities. And so just to keep my testimony brief, I just appreciate, I've learned a lot, and I appreciate all the insight, and it's making me think, and it's making me reflect a little bit more and try to see the different perspectives on this whole issue. And it's also inspired me to get more involved on a local level. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Gail? Thank you, Gail, for your testimony.
You're welcome. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to testify.
Our next speaker is going to be Jane. Jane Sprong.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Hi. Sorry. Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Lopez and members of the Housing Committee. I'm Jane Sprong. I'm a 20-year resident and homeowner in Greenwich. I serve on the Representative Town Committee meeting, and I'm also on the board of the Round Hill Association, which has held several forums on affordable housing and 830G. In addition, we personally have a deed restricted ADU in our home, and we have welcomed diverse residents to our house. As Meskers, Fazio, and others have said, Greenwich is a diverse town with 30% of families in ALICE and 20% of students in free lunch programs. I am in favor of SB 169. It is important for local municipalities to provide a plan for affordable housing. However, I'm in favor of amendments to 830G, which have been over 30 years and can be made better. Our local town, P&Z, and our local housing authority understand the unique infrastructure, safety, and natural resources of Greenwich. A one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work. I can personally tell you that my basement has been flooded with 3 feet of water over the last 3 epic storms. So I can only imagine how our infrastructure will hold up with forced high-density housing proposed by developers. I support amendments to 830G. As it is currently written in Greenwich, it mostly helps developers who build large market rate buildings with only 1-bedroom affordable units, which is not sufficient for working families. I am also in support of the amendments to 830G as proposed by our Greenwich legislators, as we want real solutions that can make 830G work. For example, lower the % threshold to enable towns to plan better without undue pressure. Remove the burden on zoning commissions to justify denials, which leads to pressure on commissions to make permanent land use decisions without enough information on safety and environmental impacts, and high cost of retaining experts to challenge the experts brought in by developers. Give towns the appropriate time to submit their newly mandated 5-year affordable housing plans according to 830G. Change the definition of what is deemed affordable to include low-cost housing that is not deed restricted, such as housing provided by nonprofit organizations or housing that are accessory dwelling units of existing properties. Fix the denominator of total housing stock in 1990, the year that 830G passed, so that the 10% ratio is not a mathematical impossibility, with the denominator increasing faster than the numerator when big development projects create too many luxury units against too few low-income units. Rehabilitate existing housing stocks. Rehabilitate existing housing stocks must be part of any strategic plan, not just a focus on new developments. Also, let's look at rental assistance programs to help folks getting into existing housing. What is going on with the United Connecticut rental and electric assistance programs, which some delays and is not accepting any more applications? Thank you very much for your time. And I truly hope that we can come up with a bipartisan solution to this.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions?
That's it.
Thank you, Jane. Thomas McCoffey.
Okay, thank you.
It's pronounced McCoy, actually, although it doesn't look much like it.
I apologize.
Thank you. Not at all. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I've been a resident, had a home in New Canaan, Connecticut since 1984. And I've seen, especially over the past several years, the 830G used to leave us with some very incongruous and unnecessarily ugly buildings. I don't think, having heard this testimony today, we're going to find too much agreement on all matters, but I have a very modest, simple suggestion as to how to help. Let me give you an example. On one of the more busy corners right close to downtown, there's a new proposal from a developer to take a site of a single family house and put in 102 units, 5 stories high, over a parking garage. And needless to say, all the local neighbors are outraged. I think if we had a simple solution where we provided that the new developments could be not materially higher than the surrounding existing housing stock, I think a lot of the opposition to these affordable housing units would actually fade away. For example, instead of 102 units in this development, you'd have a 3-story building with perhaps 60 units, which would be much more acceptable. That's it, just a simple suggestion.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? And I apologize once again for pronouncing your name wrong.
Not at all.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Jordan J.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
How you doing? My name is Jordan Johnson. I'm a UConn School of Social Work student from New Haven, Connecticut, and I'm also the owner of Part of My Past LLC. I was just trying to support this bill. I support this bill because I believe this study includes restoring equal rights for ex-offenders when it comes to obtaining housing after being released from incarceration. This study should protect the housing applicants who may have criminal records from discrimination and denial. This approach regulates and limits landlords' review and use of criminal background checks to screen rental applicants or tenants, prevent blanket denial by landlords or applicants with criminal records. I believe this can also be a step towards lowering recidivism rates, giving individuals a chance when coming out of incarceration, housing if able to obtain employment. With the ban the box law passing in Connecticut in 2017, more ex-offenders were able to secure employment to support themselves, but were not able to secure affordable housing due to the criminal past. It is a fact that 6 out of 10 individuals coming out of incarceration with no identification card, housing, and no ways of transportation makes a difference in re-entering society while trying to turn a new leaf in life. I support this bill and ask that it be taken into consideration for those re-entry population folks be able to have their human rights restored after being released and have equal opportunities like any other human being alive. Thank you for your consideration. Any questions?
Thank you, Jordan. Are there any questions for Jordan? Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move to Montreal Morrison.
My name is Montreal Morrison. I'm an MSW student at UConn University of Connecticut. I want to address the pertinence of this housing bill on affordable housing coming from the stance as a mentor and as a service provider working with juvenile justice youth and youth at risk. the housing bill, homelessness and juvenile justice involvement goes hand in hand. From my personal experience as a mentor and service provider who works with youth in the JJ system, youth who do not have permanent and safe housing, these challenges often intersect into their school lives and employment responsibilities. As a result, these challenges causes additional stress and trauma for these young people who want to be successful in life. Additional challenges are educational and employment challenges, justice involvement, in addition to the outcomes of stability and healthy relationships in regards to being homeless, in regards to affordable housing policies. Thank you for your consideration in my time of speaking on this important policy.
Thank you much. Are there any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
I think I did better than him.
For our next person is Prince. And I'm gonna apologize once again for the mispronunciation. Brigitte? Or is it Bridget? Probably maybe just Bridget.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Housing Committee. I appreciate the opportunity. I was literally sending you an email. I believe I got the address wrong after you put your email in the chat box. I am actually speaking on behalf of veterans for been a neglected demographic as far as affordable housing is concerned in Connecticut. There are very few specifically for homeless veterans, veterans families, and if can be considered while you are revamping SB 169. In the recent past, I have made a proposal to the city of Hartford regarding veterans housing, and it has been shut down completely, all while luxury apartments are being built throughout the city, throughout Hartford, and in the town of East Hartford, where I am from. I grew up in East Hartford, and the only federal housing project that still stands, which is called Hockenham Park. And when I go to the town and ask for some assistance, the first thing we are told is, well, the town of East Hartford does not govern or does not oversee this federal housing project. However, in last month, actually, they have approved a $1 sale of millions of dollars of municipal land to a private developer to build luxury apartments. So I do appreciate being on this call, because I listen to everybody's comments, and I agree. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of misrepresentation, and there's a lot of disrespect to low-income people, and specifically to veterans. I mean, we're just looking for a place to live, because even now, while there's the potential of war, even though the president says he's not sending the troops to war, they're deploying. You've sent them to Germany, and they're on high alert. I was in Germany and Europe headquarters, so I know how that feels to be sent somewhere to fight for a foreign entity, but to come back and to the city of Hartford where I was born, or to East Hartford where I was raised, and to see people standing there with a sign that says, "I'm a homeless veteran, please support me because I can't get affordable housing." So if we are not in that group of privileged private developers, and if we're not part of this clique, and CRDA and the town of East Hartford and other places, we're just lost. So, I mean, I really wanted to emphasize that, because I think veteran communities are needed just as much as elderly specific elderly complexes are needed, because when a veteran comes home, sometimes the only way they can heal and be integrated back into society is to have their own community. So those are my comments, and I really appreciate you letting me share.
Well, thank you for testifying, and also thank you for your service. Are there any questions? Seeing none, once again, thank you for sharing, and thank you for your service to the country.
Very much. Thank you.
Alexis Harrison.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. Sorry, I missed my spot. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you very much for taking the time to hear this. This is a hard topic. I was here on this panel, on this committee a few days ago. Again, Alexis Harrison, Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm on the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. I've been on it for 3 months, and I can tell you in 3 months, I think we've had about 4 830G applications. We are very committed in Fairfield to creating diverse homes, 830G places to live for people. We are just very committed, and we take that very seriously. 830G was passed with great intentions. I think we all agree on that, but I think it's resulted in very unintended consequences. It's a very laudable goal. We know this, but I think it's been hijacked by predatory developers and investors who are able to game this local zoning ordinance by using it to supersede, the zoning regulations, everything that you and I have to adhere to if we want to build something. And they change the fabric of our neighborhoods, modest neighborhoods, very different neighborhoods in Fairfield. They take land that could be ordinarily used for open space preservation of our natural resources, wildlife, natural flood mitigation. Fairfield, we continue to make meaningful progress in adding diverse new housing, but unfortunately, as other speakers have said today, the math doesn't work. It's virtually a mathematical impossibility for most towns to ever achieve 10% of their housing stock as affordable. I just want to know, I think this is a really good bill. I think this is a study worth doing, worth investing in. But I would think that we wanted to get very specific in terms of studying 830G. The purpose of the study, I think, is restricted to solely improving affordable housing opportunities, but it also ignores the numerous negative impacts that 830G has had on our local communities, such as property values, open space, historical site preservation, infrastructure capacity, municipal finances, property taxes, public safety, and very importantly, environmental and wildlife protection. In 30 years since 830G was passed, climate change has really, it's hurting us, and we know so much more about it. And I think the environmental impact of 830G really has to be studied at length. And also needing to be studied is the shifting of the burden of proof from development applicants to zoning commissions, which has made it impossible to defend decisions modifying or denying massive at-a-scale projects, even when the zoning decision is based on our own expert testimony, such as a fire marshal or police officials. Also not mentioned in the study is a seemingly arbitrary 10% target. Where did that come from? Why is that not being addressed? Again, that's an impossibility of the vast majority of our state's 169 municipalities to ever achieve. Again, thank you very much for your consideration today. I know this is a tough topic. Everybody is a stakeholder here in 830G. It's not just housing advocates. It's not just people like me. It's everybody. So really appreciate everybody coming together on this. Thank you.
President Paletta.
Thank you. One quick question. We heard from individual from Darien a little bit earlier, much earlier. And I don't know, Ms. Harrison, if you were on the call or listening to the testimony. She had alluded to the fact that Darien had worked with 830G developers, and that was the reason why they were so successful at it, but maybe some of the other towns in Fairfield County were not. And since you have a front row seat in the town of Fairfield, and it seems to be a bipartisan effort, at least in the town of Fairfield, to address this issue, can you speak to what the town of Fairfield has done in terms of affordable housing? And I don't want to say negate what she said, because I believe what she's saying, that Darienne's done a great job, but it almost sounded like these other towns in lower Fairfield County that are having an issue with this, Greenwich and Fairfield and other towns in and around the area have had not the same, what's the word I'm looking for, positive impact by the law. So could you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I can't, I don't have much visibility to Darien. I don't speak for the town of Fairfield, I'm not the first select woman or the mayor. But I can say Fairfield, we did amend our AD regulations last year. We're probably going to expand them again this year. So that's another, way to have diversity of housing. I can get you more stats on the work that we've been doing to add affordable housing. Like other towns, we have a transit-oriented development area where a considerable amount of diverse housing has been built. I would love for you guys to come down to Fairfield, as Representative Devlin invited you, and we'd love to have you and to show you what we're doing, because the work is real. We are committed to this. Look at, everyone deserves a home. Everyone deserves to have that opportunity. We're not saying that, but we don't want these monstrosities built in neighborhoods. These developers are gaming the system, and that's a bad thing. Why would we ever want them, enrich them? We should be helping people get on the pathway to ownership, not just, here, you can go live in a nice apartment in Fairfield. How is that helping anybody create real generational wealth? I know how hard it is to buy a house. I get it. I get the pain people feel, but I just don't see this working. And I think it's destroying our town. It's destroying our environment. And I think that's a big thing that we have to look at. I don't do this for fun. I'm very serious about zoning and creating diverse housing. That's one of the reasons I ran for zoning. I'm not sure, Representative Paletta, that actually answers your question, but I want you to tell you the work here is real. I offer you to sit at a zoning meeting here in Fairfield and hear our deliberations.
I guess it's encouraging to hear, that at least you're working on it and your town has taken steps to address affordable housing. And it's not just the notion that you guys have done nothing and you don't want it there. And
we have a housing trust fund, that's been in existence for decades. We built affordable housing, in the 60s, the 70s, way before 830G came into existence. I mean, this has been front and center for many years.
Yeah, that's really what the crux of my questioning was, is that it's not like you're ignoring it and you don't want it there. I think you just see a different path as opposed to what the woman from Darien was.
Yeah, and I think we all agree that diversity is good for any community. We all know that. And you can't, we don't live in a homogenous world. We need diversity. Thank you.
I agree.
Any other questions?
Again, please come down to Fairfield. We all want to see you down here, and we have great pizza.
I will gladly stop by as I drive to Stanford regularly, since that's where I work. So
very good. Thank you, Representative Williams.
Yes, I'm in Fairfield County almost every day for this.
God bless you.
So thank you very much. No, very familiar. Melissa is our next speaker.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for for sending me the information to even get on the call. I just wanted to say, in regards to the bill itself, I hope that they actually just take into consideration, because I'm from New Haven, Connecticut, and I know in New Haven there's a big shortage of rentals. There's a shortage of affordable housing. I'm a renter as well, and I know recently my landlord also tried to go up on my rent over $300 because of all the new bills that are taking place. There's no responsibility in regards from the city when it deals with all these mega landlords that are buying up all the properties. They're not allowing the citizens to even take part into buying the properties to afford, to be able to be in a position to afford affordable housing or provide affordable rentals to the people that are in the city of New Haven. So I hope that with this bill that they do look at it on a broad aspect and open their mindset to knowing that this bill can help a lot of people if it's properly used, and to understand that there are no affordable housing within the city of New Haven as far as I can see, because with all the new builds that they're building with these properties, the rent amount that they're offering is not a fixed rent amount that people in the city can even afford. So I just wanted to share that with you all, to let you know that I hope that with this bill that they do pass, or with the legislation and everything that's taking place, that affordable housing and affordable home ownership is something that could be considered. Thank you. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Any questions for Melissa?
Thank you so much.
Seeing none. Thank you, Melissa, for your testimony. Kimberly Norton. Kimberly?
I'm just starting my video. Hi. Thank you for putting me in the queue. Sorry I'm late. I was in a doctor's office with my son. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Kimberly Norton. I'm a Connecticut homeowner, parent, professional, taxpayer, resident, and voter in our state. I'm here today to speak in favor of Senate Bill 169. I've lived in New London during my college years, vacationed in Litchfield County, have a child who now attends college in a city bordering New Haven, spent time in the quiet corner of our state, and currently reside in Fairfield County. We have a beautiful state with all 169 towns offering a unique and distinct natural landscape, culture, and identity that needs to be preserved. My message today is that there are better ways to achieve our affordable housing goals than a one-size-fits-all policy like 830G that's 30 years old and outdated. Every town should have the flexibility and latitude to decide how their town can address the need for affordable housing in their community. 830G is a one-size-fits-all statute that deprives local municipalities from using creativity and engagement of the local community to find a solution to affordable housing while simultaneously retaining the beauty and the natural landscape of their town. It's not an either or proposition, and 830G creates an unnecessary dichotomy where towns are mandated to address affordable housing and give up their rights to develop their communities. I am in favor of affordable housing. State Senator Will Haskell, our youngest senator, in his recent book, 1000 Bosses, talked about how hard it is for college students who have just graduated in Connecticut to find affordable housing. In order for our state to thrive, we need to attract talented students from UConn, Conn College, Wesleyan, Yale, Sacred Heart, Fairfield University, and more, as well as provide housing for our essential workers, families, and unhoused populations. But not by adhering to the rigid parameters of Statute 830G that results in unintended consequences for our communities, like loss of natural landscapes, loss of historic homes, loss of open space, disruption of pollinator pathways, stressing our infrastructure, and in many cases presents unattractive, dense housing that detracts from property values, the very core of our tax basis in Connecticut. Picture going to a store to buy an outfit or a pair of shoes for an important event for you and your family. Do you want to get a one-size-fit-all outfit or a pair of shoes? Do you want a size 5 shoe when you're a size 10? Sounds uncomfortable, right? It's common sense that Connecticut does not need the one-size-fits-all 830 statute to meet the need for affordable housing. We need to amend, tweak, adjust the way to achieve our goal by allowing local municipalities the flexibility to achieve these goals. Trust in our local elected officials to find a solution in each of Connecticut's 169 towns, and please stop trying to dictate how to do this by pushing the inflexible, rigid 830 statute as the only way. I've got one more sentence. There are better ways. I urge you to support Senate Bill 169 today and help Connecticut find better ways to house its residents and retain the beauty and charm of every town. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Chance Jackson.
How you guys doing? Thank you, committee, for allowing me to speak today. Thank you, representatives. My name is Chance Jackson. I'm at the School of Social Work for the University of Connecticut. I'm here to support Bill 169. Connecticut is faced with a dire housing affordability crisis. The National Low Income Housing Coalition states that more than 64% of low to extreme low income renters statewide spend more than 30% of their income on housing. It is also stated that 31% of all renters in Connecticut identify as extremely low, at which 64% of these households are spending half of their income on housing and utilities, which only indicates the cost burden of rent in Connecticut. In Connecticut, there are over 148 extremely low income housing families, and only a little over 61,000 affordable rental units available. This results in 42 affordable units to every 100 households for extremely low income. Imagine having the means to procure one of these units, but can't because there isn't one available. Or imagine having to spend half of your income on housing. Subsequently, it has forced more and more families to sacrifice the necessities and other places to prevent situations like evictions. Maybe we don't need heat and hot water this month. Cold showers in the winter, that's regular to us. How about skipping dinner and relying on schools to feed our children? Now imagine this. Now imagine the effects this has on school. The issue of housing is introduced in more and more places in life. This may seem like hyperbole to some people, but this is the don't reality for other people in Connecticut. Now imagine how these staggering numbers are adversely affecting the reentry population. The lack of affordable housing leaves people returning from being incarcerated at an unfair disadvantage. Discharge plannings are helping, but with the combination of strict housing policies, community resistance, zoning, limited access to housing, it's nearly impossible for somebody returning home to get adequate housing. So I propose a joint substitution in language that should be added to this bill proposal that includes the reentry population as a separate targeted group that has to be accounted for in this study. Having a reentry population in this study is vital in towards the progression of fixing these housing issues. People who have been convicted of felonies and misdemeanors in Connecticut are placed in a pool of burden. This reentry population has an extremely difficult time procuring housing with the impediments given like the discretionary freedoms of employers and strict housing policies. It's become harder and harder for ex-offenders to shake the shackles of confinement. In every city, there are laws designed to prohibit, discriminate, and impede ex-offenders from achieving these or progressing back into society. While some crimes require restrictions for public safety purposes, non-violent offenses should enforce such collateral consequences. Marginalizing people for minor offenses is only further heightening our penal system. My name is Chance Jackson. I firmly am a believer in a second chance. And let's give these people returning home a fair chance at a fresh start. That's why I urge you to support the bill and have some substantive language about ex-offenders specifically. Chance Jackson.
Thank you, Chance. Senator Lopes.
Hello, Mr. Jackson. Good to see you and your colleagues come out from UConn. I don't know if you know, but UConn social work graduate, 2003, sitting over here.
We bleed blue, baby.
Who's pushing the political social work? What professor is?
There's a bunch of them, but I'm with Cindy right now.
Cindy.
Gallo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might not believe this, but 2003 when I graduated was a long time ago.
Bro, you're about 24. Stop it.
All right. Thanks a lot. You did a great job.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chance?
Thank you.
I will say go Nova then.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Dice, number 21.
Hey, hi, sorry, I'm having some video problems, so it'll be just on audio. So I'd like to talk about 830G. In my opinion, I'm concerned about the efforts to try to weaken this statute. If anything, I believe it should be strengthened. I live in Fairfield County, where there's a massive housing shortage. So just some facts, over the last 10 years, according to the Regional Plan Association, Fairfield County, about a population of 1 million, has grown its housing stock by something like 0.2% annually over the last 10 years, which is, if you compare us to other areas near the New York City metro region, that is an abysmally low housing production rate. And I think it's really important for people to understand that the housing crisis and the affordable housing crisis is fundamentally a supply issue. Connecticut simply does not produce enough housing to meet the demand for new families, renters, and people moving here for jobs. And a big part of that, there are a lot of reasons behind that. We have restrictive zoning. We have very development hostile elected planning and zoning commissions. We have very long permitting and approval times. And I believe 830G is a very important state tool to expand housing production, particularly in places like Fairfield County, where there's huge demand for housing and not enough of it being provided. I hear a lot of talk about local control and neighborhood character. These are important considerations, but I believe local planning processes have completely overweighed those considerations relative to the need to expand supply, produce affordable housing. I'm sure you're aware of the NIMBY problem, and Connecticut, especially is one of the most exclusionary zoned and segregated states in the country. And a big part of that is that land use policy is set at a hyper local level. So it's very easy for people to say, oh, we support affordable housing and we'll have a token community land trust or inclusionary zoning. But at the end of the day, you have a lot of homeowners, who don't want to see their neighborhoods change, who don't like seeing apartments from their house. And while I can understand that you cannot hold a region's housing market hostage to the aesthetic desires of longtime homeowners. Fairfield County needs to grow. It needs to accommodate a growing population. We need more tools, not just 830G, to help that happen. I would like to see more zoning reform, transit-oriented communities, that sort of thing. But I believe 830G should be strengthened rather than weakened. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for Dice? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Tim Hollister.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Tim.
Thank you, Representative Williams and senators and representatives. I am a land use attorney at Hinckley, Allen and Snyder in Hartford. And I just came back to the hearing because I just spent the last hour co-chairing with Representative Lamar the first meeting of the Affordable Housing Plan Working Group, which is part of the Commission on Connecticut's Future and Development. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. My affordable housing lineage, I guess, is I assisted the original 1988-89 Blue Ribbon Commission, Professor Tondro, when he was co-chair in drafting what became 830G. I served as a member of the second Blue Ribbon Commission in 1999, a commission which, by the way, people sort of forget about this, made very significant changes to 830G in specific response to concerns of municipal officials. So it's not as though this was enacted in 1989 or 90 and nothing's been done since. There actually was a process 20 years ago, and I think the reforms enacted in 2000 have worked very well and addressed many municipal concerns. I have handled about 100 830G applications over 32 years. I have made it my business on my own time to keep the statewide housing community and this committee and other legislators updated on 830G, including yesterday when I circulated a statewide groups a memo answering the question, how many housing units can be attributed to 830G over its 32 years. That's sort of where I'm coming from. Regarding Senate Bill 169, I would say this, and I think this may be a different perspective than you've gotten so far. I think it's premature, and here's why I say that. Under the 830J, the existing law, all towns are required to prepare affordable housing plans, and under Public Act 21-29, towns are required to be updating their plans this year. The plans are due in June of 2022, and the Commission on Connecticut's Futures and the Affordable Housing Plan Working Group, which we just kicked off just in the past hour, is tasked with preparing a written guidance document to towns across the state as to what standards and metrics and process they should use in developing their affordable housing plans. Reference has been made here today to about 26 plans being filed so far. I have read each and every one of those plans. There are some that are exceptionally good. There are others that are exceptionally not so good, in the sense that there's one, and I'm not going to call out the town, but they have an action plan section that just uses the verbs host, adopt, create, provide, and reduce, not a single actual concrete action plan. So with that's sort of what we have to do. So I would say
your 3-minute mark, so please summarize.
Yes, I will summarize by saying I think the intention of SB 169 would be much better reconsidered after the working group that I'm sitting on has done its work. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions for Tim? Representative Zullo.
Attorney Hollister, thank you. I felt like you were rushed at the very end, and I wanted you to have a second to complete that last thought if you needed it.
Well, thank you. Representative Lamar would back me up on this. We just introduced ourselves in the working group. Wonderful group of people that are really going to, in good faith and across the state, suburban, urban, rural, all four corners of the state, we're going to create a really excellent document, and one that will take into account that we have small towns with no budgets that really need help, and we have affluent, sophisticated communities that have, the wherewithal to hire professional staff and everything in between. And we have to hit that balance correctly. And I think we're going to do so. So I'm very excited about the process, but I think with SB 169, we may be working at cross purposes if there's yet another study going on. So I just, I'm not taking a position for or against the bill. I'm just letting you know what's going on in parallel. And I think the goal, the good faith goals of SB 169 will be better fleshed out if you would wait till the next session. That's all I'm saying. Thank you, Representative Zullo.
I appreciate the follow-up. Thank you, Attorney. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
There's plenty of things for everyone. Any other questions for the counselor? Seeing none, thank you, Tim, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Sam G.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you to the leadership and members of the Housing Committee, and thanks for the opportunity to submit testimony today. My name is Sam Giffen. I'm the policy and data analyst at Open Communities Alliance, or OCA, a civil rights nonprofit that promotes equitable access to housing across the state. I submit this testimony to express my and my organization's strong support for preserving General Statute 8-30G and unequivocal opposition to any attempt to dismantle or weaken the vital tool for creating affordable housing in Connecticut. If SB 169 is meant to open the door to scaling back 830G or calling into question its continued relevance, which we have reason to believe it is, the bill should be rejected. When it comes to strategies for expanding access to affordable housing, Connecticut needs more tools, not fewer. As has been said before today, Connecticut is one of the most racially and economically segregated states in the country, and the need for diverse housing types of affordable housing is dire. Connecticut General Statute Section 8-30G has produced thousands of affordable housing units and thousands of units of denser, more affordable housing types in Connecticut, and is an effective tool which should be bolstered with additional robust policies to further expand the creation of affordable housing in all parts of the state. Weakening it or dismantling it should not even be on the table. There is no need to further study this demonstrably effective affordable housing creation tool. OCA's research, analysis, and years of experience working to further housing choice and end segregation in the state has also led us to conclude that town planning and zoning policies create immense, complex, and widespread impediments to both deed-restricted affordable housing and other forms of denser, more affordable housing. You can find more on that in our 2021 report, Zoning for Equity. 830G is just one tool, but a valuable one that allows affordable housing to be built despite these impediments. It does so by enabling developers to build desperately needed affordable housing units via subsidized and inclusionary housing when towns cannot point to any sufficiently good reason to reject the proposals. And let me be clear, 830G is far from a free pass. To the contrary, no 830G project can be built without first going through a rigorous public hearing process and persuading the zoning commission that the development would not create a health or safety risk. Proposals must go through an environmental and historic preservation review, just like any other development. OCA has found that expanding affordable housing options throughout Connecticut would generate massive economic benefits for our towns, regions, and state, from the income that would be generated, the jobs that would be created, the taxes that would be paid on new, well-designed, and high-quality housing. And as to inclusionary developments, which is frequently what developers propose via 830G, such housing generally comes at no cost to the taxpayer, since deed-restricted units are bundled with market rate units rather than relying on subsidies. We need more not fewer tools to create affordable housing and multifamily housing. And we absolutely need to preserve the ones we have. For these reasons, Open Communities Alliance supports 8-30G and opposes SB 169, an unnecessary measure. And I ask, please also refer to the written testimony submitted by our Executive Director, Aaron Boggs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions for Sam? Sam, maybe you can just answer maybe at least one question, maybe several. I know several folks have testified regarding the sort of like easy pass. I think you even mentioned the easier pass that the developers may have. What sort of obstacles or challenges are they getting past?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Or what rules or regulations are being worked around? I'm not saying it right, but there's been this continuous idea that there's an easier pass, or it's so much easier if you do an 830G. And I'm wondering what kind of variability do they have that they wouldn't have if they did it in a traditional route, or if they didn't use 830G?
To the contrary, I was attempting to state that it's very much not a free pass, that developers are still burdened with extremely lengthy zoning processes. 830G doesn't get them out of other state level requirements, even other local requirements, such as conservation, historic preservation. So really, it's not a free pass as often it is misinterpreted to be. Really, it's actually quite impressive that so many developers are willing to go through such a process in towns that are openly hostile to multifamily affordable housing development. Developers do this knowing that they may go through a pretty antagonistic public hearing process, facing lots of local opposition. They may be, locked in legal battle for years and years, and they may eventually still not succeed in doing the business that they sought to do in these towns. So I think it's a testament to how much demand there really is for more housing, more affordable housing types, more dense housing, that developers are still willing to try to go through this process, even though there is perhaps not always a great chance of success, even though the timeline for this process is extremely expensive to developers. And as was previously mentioned, they're basically building affordable housing without costing the taxpayers anything.
So maybe a better question. So what rules are they following then?
I will defer to my attorney colleagues for some of the ins and outs. But in general, they do go through the regular zoning process.
Okay.
What 830G does is shift the burden to towns. If a development proposal is rejected, the town must actually show that a public health or safety risk outweighs the need for affordable housing.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions for Sam? Thank you for that clarification. I said I do really think there's going to be a need for significant education after this. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cherry Brooks.
Hi, how are you?
We're
Can you hear me
good.
fine?
It's kind of iffy. Is it just iffy on mine?
Can you hear me better now?
There we go.
Okay, hi. My name is Cherry Brooks. I'm a resident of Hartford, and I'm here just to support Bill 169. I just want to give you like a personal testimony. I'm recently home from incarceration, so I'm a single parent of 2, and the cost of living here has been high. Just recently, I was out of work due to COVID and was unable to pay my rent. So I was asked to leave the premises. They don't want to renew my lease. I feel like it's close to impossible to get housing because of my felony record. You know, living in a state without, I believe, programs like this leaves you vulnerable. It is really concerning that. I'm sorry. I just feel like even if I could afford to live in a better place, with me and my kids, where it would be a lot safer and a lot cleaner, I don't have those same opportunities given because of my record. So I feel as though that they need to change the application requirements. You know, the from the credit score to, you know, just what the criteria of a background check, all of those plays a part in a hindrance of someone who's trying to maintain and have a stable home. You know, I grew up in a home, and as I get older, yes, I made a mistake, but I'm still being punished for that mistake every day. And I think that programs like this can really help people in my situation.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Brooks? Ms. Brooks, any further comments?
I just like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity.
No, thank you for sharing your time.
Have a great day.
Good night. Next on the list is Aaron Chang.
Hello.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Lopes and Chairman Williams, members of the committee. I'm here today to speak in favor of SB 169. Representative Williams, I was thinking your question is well answered by the individual local planning and zoning boards to whom the burden of proof is shifted in the application process under the 830G. Listening today, there's been some good information that's come out of this hearing, which is one reason I believe a study panel on 830G promotes more dialogue and would be helpful. Perhaps the towns should be interpreting the legislation differently. The distinction between the moratorium and what housing qualifies under the 10% rule has been made, deed restrictions expiring, et cetera. I agree with the professor that spoke earlier. In my opinion, affordable housing is better built by the public sector, and I fully support initiatives to provide affordable housing for Connecticut residents. Interesting point was made by another speaker that some towns have not even heard about 830G, and it's not because those municipalities have complied with 8-30G requirements when only 31 of 169 municipalities in our state are in compliance with the 10% mandate. Here in my hometown of Greenwich, we are under assault from developers. In the first almost 20 years of its enactment, there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 projects proposed. And in the past 2+ years, there have been 13 applications made under 8-30G. Why is this? Because developers are taking advantage of the statute. Please allow our municipalities to have a voice in exercising control over local zoning. Perhaps re-examine the definition as to what constitutes affordable housing to include low-cost housing that is not deed restricted, such as housing provided by nonprofit organizations or housings that are accessory dwelling units or of existing properties. Greenwich Connections, for example, formerly the Greenwich Housing Authority, has been creating affordable housing, which includes promoting those formerly residing in affordable housing to move out of this housing and purchase their own homes, incentivizing people. We should be looking for similar ways to empower lower income housed individuals and not apply what purports to be a one-size-fits-all legislation to the varying urban, suburban, and rural municipalities across our state. While recognizing more people will move into municipalities under affordable housing, there's also an impact of moving well-established residents that have lived in Greenwich for all of their lives out of the town, as they do not want to live in what is promoting to be these higher new dense areas that will result. There's overtaxing of our infrastructure, lower local sewer capacity, soils, water tables, environmental conditions, flooding patterns, and other vital infrastructure constraints that could lead to very serious risks to public safety. I thank you for allowing me to testify here today, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chang. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
You too. Thanks.
Next on the list, I have Andrea Sandor. Blocks keep moving around, throwing me off. I don't see Andrea. So we will go on to Walter Shaw. I don't see Mr. Shaw. Thomas Broderick.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you all. Yes, I guess it's my lucky number. Thank you all for the opportunity to provide this testimony. My name is Thomas Broderick. I'm a resident of Trumbull, and I am an educator in Ridgefield. I'm here in opposition to SB 169 and broadly speaking in support of Section 830G. SB 9 purports to study affordable housing policies in the state, but it seems like the effects of 830G are pretty clear. Thousands of affordable units built, including in opportunity-rich towns such as Fairfield and New Canaan. This is something that we need more than ever. Exclusionary zoning and high housing prices, especially in my home region of Fairfield County, are an issue for thousands. The people here today supporting SB 169 and opposing 830G make rhetorical gestures towards affordable housing, arguing that it's best to leave the decisions to the town. But we know the decision that many of these towns will make, which is not to build any affordable housing. My wife is from Fairfield, and we visit it often. In a recent Fairfield Patch article, when referencing a modest 43-unit apartment complex, Fairfield Zoning Commissioner Daniel Ford said, "If this wasn't an 830G, I would vote no. I would not approve this." This is why we need 830G in addition to other housing reforms. I live in Trumbull and teach in Ridgefield, and I get to see on a daily basis how growing up in an affluent, opportunity-rich community benefits my neighbors and students. And I want the same thing for every child and family in the state. In Connecticut, we use the term home to refer to single family homes, but the more clinical word unit to describe apartments. Every affordable unit made because of 830G is a new home for an individual or a family. That's a home near a good school, a home close to a job with a career path, or a home where families will make memories together. Building apartments, market rate and otherwise, is not a punishment or a negative consequence, and we cannot allow our most prosperous towns to block development. My concern is that the seemingly reasonable goal of studying affordable housing is going to be used to dismantle it. So please take this opportunity to strengthen 830G, expand housing construction across the state, and provide opportunities to thousands of our fellow residents. We really can build a more prosperous and just Connecticut. And I want to thank you all for your time. I know what a long day it is for you.
Not a problem. That's why we get the big bucks. Any questions from Mr. Broderick? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony, your time, and good luck out there. I think we owe an apology to Walter Shaw. We somehow skipped you. Sorry about that, but you're up now, sir.
That's okay. Thank you, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, Chairman Lopez and distinguished members of this board, my name is Walter Shaw. I'm a resident of Fairfield, Connecticut. I live on the Old Post Road with my wife for 27 years. I am the treasurer of the Old Post Road Area Association. That board, our organization, was founded in 1952 to work at preserving and maintaining the historic integrity of Fairfield's historic district. The reason I'm addressing you today is, and Representative Laura Devlin brought this up, there is a small plot of land that abuts the historic district in Fairfield on Beach Road. And there is a developer that wants to build a 5-story complex of 40 units overlooking the historic district. We have over 1,500 Fairfield residents who have signed a petition opposing this. And it's not because it's affordable housing. Let me be clear about that. We're opposing it because it's incongruous with the area he's proposing to build it. I want to run a couple facts real quickly because I know I've got 3 minutes here. If this is approved in its final form, because it's in litigation now, this structure will be one of the tallest buildings in Fairfield. It will loom over historic homes built in the 18th and 19th century. It will directly face the Congregational Church founded in 1639. It will be visible from St. Paul's Episcopal Church, erected in 1855, prior to the Civil War. It will be in plain view of Fairfield's Town Hall and Town Green. And ironically, it is at this precise location across the street. A sign was posted by the town of Fairfield for pedestrians and drivers that you are now entering the historic part of Fairfield. And I just, I can't think of a better word. I've used this word for the last 3 years, incongruous. It's an adjective that describes something lacking in harmony. It's unsuitable and inappropriate. And I can't imagine a more accurate word that describes this situation. I have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to try to squeeze all this in. The other interesting point on this, after multiple hearings and testimonies during COVID, the TP&Z in Fairfield approved this project. They approved it. But citing in a 9-page approval the issues of safety, density, and the negative impact on the historic district. And the approval also included 2 major stipulations: that the building could not exceed 40 feet, and that line of sight parking spaces along.
3 minutes is up, so please summarize.
Oh boy. Oh, well, hopefully someone will ask me a question, because I think I have a solution, Chairman Lopez, that might help this. And so we're at an impasse where this is now before Judge Berger in Hartford. He heard oral arguments in November of last year. We're hoping that he agrees to the ruling of the TP&Z of Fairfield. They put a lot of careful thought into this. But most importantly, I think this particular situation of 830G is at absolute evidence and emblematic of how this law is utilized by predatory developers. It's a burden on the town committees. It cripples homeowners and people who have purchased homes, particularly in this area. We have neighbors who have bought their homes 40 or 50 years ago. And, not to mention property taxes going up 600% in our area. It's just an onerous law that is punitive to so many people. Now, one quick thing, and I know safety is important. In this area, if you add his building, which is 40 units, you're talking roughly about 80 cars, roughly 2 cars per unit. There's already a congestion problem in this area. I can't exit my driveway in the morning most times. Most of my other neighbors have the same problem. On our block alone, we have 16 families. So 300 feet from our house, they want to erect a 40-unit complex and add up to.
Okay, I think you're over your time, Mr. Shaw.
Oh, well, somebody please ask me a question, because I think I have a solution.
Well, have you submitted written testimony?
I haven't, sir, but I will. And I do have just a brief summary of an explanation that I think it's worth hearing, if I may. Just one minute. We have a local real estate developer who took the time.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw. In order to be fair to everyone, if you could just submit that in written testimony.
Okay.
We will ask, are there any questions for Mr. Shaw?
This is Senator Chicarello. I can't find my hand raised. I do apologize. If he could just summarize the solution. I understand it's probably a complicated and lengthy solution, but if you could just give me a overview of the solution, and I'd love to follow up when we have more time. But if you could just summarize your solution.
Thank you, sir. No, it's not complicated at all. The statute says that if you use 830G, you have to provide 30% affordable. We had a highly respected developer on our block who took the time, and he's developed thousands of rental units in Connecticut and Massachusetts. And they did 2 financial plans. One is the plan that shows 40 units with 30% affordable. It's a losing proposition. I mean, at one point we have to look at the financials involved here. It's roughly a 3% return after everything's paid for, the debt service, et cetera. Then we built a second model. Now hear me on this because it's important. A 20 unit building with 10% affordable. Now I know that goes against the law because it's supposed to be 30%, but in the spirit of compromise, I think this is an opportunity, and all my neighbors have agreed to this, that we would be willing to go along with a 10% affordable component. And think about it, 20 units as opposed to 40 cuts the building in half, cuts the traffic from 80 cars to potentially 40 cars. The return on investment to the developer, and I hope he's listening to this, is astronomical compared to 40 units at 30% affordable. I mean, it's basic math. And I've sent all of these financial documents to all the lawyers involved. Our lawyer sent it to the developer's lawyer, and I hope that they look at this because it's potentially one of these situations where you can compromise and say, okay, in this situation, it's the historic part of Fairfield. Let's build a smaller building. The developer is going to make more money. We're going to have less cars, less accidents. By the way, multiple pedestrians have been hit by cars in this area. It's a very congested area.
Hey, Walter, I apologize. That's specific just to this one project that's going on right near where you reside.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Excellent. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we only thought of this as an alternative because it's the building is just so massive, and it's going to overlook the town hall. It's going to be just a 60-foot building. And we're just worried that the judge, we don't know what the judge is going to decide, but we cherish this neighborhood, and mostly we cherish the historic character of Fairfield, and we want to preserve it as best we can. So I thank you for your time. I'm sorry I ran over. I will submit all this in written testimony to you, gentlemen.
Please get it to the clerk. He will include it in the permanent.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions from Mr. Shaw? Seeing none. Thank you very much. We're going to go to Sean. Oh, did I forget somebody? Hang on. Okay, Sean Hood. Not seeing Mr. Hood. I do see Mr. Hobbs, Scott Hobbs.
Yes, thank you for having me today. I'm Scott Hobbs. I'm a resident of New Canaan, Connecticut, and I'm the chairman of the Housing Authority of New Canaan. Over the last 15 years, New Canaan has gone in and spent millions of dollars renovating and increasing the size of two residential affordable projects in New Canaan. And we've taken our numbers in those projects from 100 sort of worn down and aged units, to put it kindly, up to 213 new modern units. I'm in favor of the Bill 169 with a couple of modifications. I'd like to see how that committee gets formed, because obviously if you choose the most fervent housing advocates, or you choose the people who are most fervent against 830G, I don't think we're going to end up with anything of use. We'll just end up with a political document. I would also like to have it mandated inside of the bill that there is a study of actually what is the affordable housing stock in the state, and by affordable, by rent, not by deed. Because right now we don't know what the issue, even the size or the questions of the issues that are involved in the size and magnitude of the issue of affordable housing, because we don't have the data. I would also mandate inside of the bill that the commission needs to talk to a diverse group of communities in order to really get an overall feel for what's happening. The odds that 830G works appropriately for places like Franklin, Lebanon, Clinton, New Canaan, Bristol, Danbury, Waterbury is zero. It happens differently for every one of the 169 communities involved in Connecticut. So making sure that the committee goes out and actually talks to different folks. In particular in New Canaan, which is similar to other communities, if you're a built-up community trying to go ahead and implement something in the neighborhood of trying to find another 500 units of affordable housing, which again, if done through 830G, would entail adding 2,000 units to our 7,500 units, is devastating to the community. And while every unit is a home for somebody, if I live in a home and then next door somebody knocks down one home and all of a sudden creates 100 homes inside of a 4 or 5 story building, it is incredibly traumatic and unfair to those people who happen to border this development. So trying to make sure that we actually look at the fully predictable yet unintended consequences of what 830G should be part of the study as it happens. I personally, again, I think 830G is solving issues with the bazooka, and you can solve issues with the bazooka, but there's a lot of collateral damage along the way. So I hope that there are changes to the bill. I hope, to 830G. I hope the study committee looks at the different communities and comes up with ways in order to help to advance, again, affordable housing, as towns like New Canaan have, at the same time not making us pay attention to meeting
You are
the
at 3
rules.
minutes, so please summarize.
Final element under summary, with 830G right now, all of our efforts are pushed toward meeting the rules, meeting the requirements of 830G moratoriums, because that's all we can really do. That's our only defense. And as such, we don't have enough parking in some of our developments. We are not able to put in a playground. We're not able to do as many multi-bedroom units, because in order to get the points, we got to go ahead and maximize the point totals. And even that takes years and years to do. That's all.
Thank you much, Mr. Hobbs.
I do have several questions for Mr. Hobbs.
Feel free.
Just for clarification, are you still the chair of the New Canaan Housing Authority?
I am.
And is New Canaan currently in moratorium for the 830G requirements?
Thanks to the budget freeze, our last project was pushed back, and then we ended up hitting all of COVID. So our moratorium expired. We have enough units for another moratorium, and we're filling out and completing the application process now to go for a second moratorium. When we're done with the next round of this project, we should be able to get a third moratorium.
Okay, so there has been progress to the requirements from 830G in New Canaan.
Oh, lots of progress.
Lots of progress. And if I do understand correctly, New Canaan and Darien are border towns, if I remember correctly, in my drive from Middletown to Stanford.
Correct.
Are there any unique assets that New Canaan and Darien have that some of the other neighboring towns in Fairfield County don't have?
Well,
that allowed for y'all to be able to hit these requirements.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting you bring up the two towns, because New Canaan and Darien, which are probably as much alike as any two towns can be, unless you ask the residents, because we're clearly very, very different. But having the post road in Darien changes the whole feel of the town and community, and the ability to actually do more multifamily and higher development versus a town like New Canaan. But for New Canaan and Darien, I think in both cases, there's been toward this over the last 20 years, and both communities have committed a lot of money to the process. Unfortunately, affordable housing is more expensive to develop, it's more expensive to run, and the rental income is less than market rate. So as an economist by training or study, it doesn't surprise me that there isn't more affordable housing.
It's interesting that you use the word commitment. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other questions for Scott? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony, Scott.
Thank you all very much.
Councilor Raphael.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Raphael Podolsky. I'm a lawyer with the legal aid programs. Like Tim Hollister, I have a kind of long historical connection with this. I was on the first Blue Ribbon Commission that wrote the original 8-30G, and on the second one that in the year 2000, produced major changes in the statute. I was around 5 years ago when there was another bunch of major changes in the statute. Representative Butler is obviously very familiar with those changes. I think there's no need for this study, and so in terms of the bill, I guess I would ask the committee not to move forward. But I wanted to try and comment on a few things that people have said. You've heard a lot of witnesses, and a lot of them have actually already said things I was going to say to you. But first, I want to say something about the 10%, whether there is or is not a 10% requirement, and why. Nobody's really talked about the why. Pre-1990 housing is counted in the 10%, because the 10% is sort of a photographic snapshot of where the town is. And where the town is going to have plenty of buildings and housing that were built before 1990. So that's counted. Interestingly enough, it also counts the number of units of Section 8 and RAP certificates, which are not buildings at all. Those are tenant-based certificates. The moratorium provisions, though, are completely different because they're designed to give relief to towns that has had a lot of new affordable housing construction in recent years. And normally that would only start really with now. But what it did was it went back to the effective date of the act, which was 1990. So it picked up a small amount of retroactivity, but it's not meant to be that snapshot. So that's why you have different numbers and different percentages. But one of the interesting things about the fact that the 10% counts rental certificates is that offers a way for a town that already it says, well, we've got a lot of affordable housing in our town. We've got lots of rental units. The reality is a town like that, if they really want to get to the 10%, ought to partner with the nearest urban area and say, maybe the nearest housing authority, and say, we welcome in our town the diversity of people that would come in with rental certificates, and we will work with you to try and maximize the number of people from your community that are able to move into our community. So that apart from the arithmetic people are talking about with the 10% figure, there are other ways to get to the 10%. And the reality is an 8-30G development with 30% set aside moves you to the 10%, clearly moves you towards it arithmetically. But the other piece is the 2000 statute created the moratorium. And it was always expected that was the tool the towns would use. And so I'm glad to hear someone from New Canaan talk about the fact that they've had one moratorium. They're on the verge of a second and maybe a third down the road. There are 12 towns that have gotten moratorium. And I'm going to name them because I want you to see that it's workable as a way of moving through 8-30G and using it as an opportunity for further development. Right now, Westport, Milford, Suffield, and South Windsor are in moratoria. 6 towns have had one moratorium: New Canaan, Brookfield, Ridgefield, Wilton, and Farmington. And 3 towns have had 2: Darien, Trumbull, and Berlin. So you need to know that while the 10% is not a requirement, it's not even a goal. It's simply an on-off switch for whether 8-30G applies. But towns who are focused on the 10% are completely, in my opinion, misfocused. The focus should be on the moratorium. Another thing I want to say something about is that there was some suggestion that there's nothing affordable here. But I looked at what's required for the highest rent areas in the state, which would be lower Fairfield County. In order for a developer to do an 8-30G, if he was doing 2-bedroom units, the rents in those units have to be below for the 60% people, which is for people below 60% of median, 15% of the units at least have to rent for $1,385 or less. And that has to include utilities. The rent's got to be less than that if utilities aren't included. That's for a 2-bedroom. 3-bedroom is $1,601. For those of us in the Hartford area, you say, well, gee, that's not all that affordable. But my understanding is that in Stamford and in the Stamford area, in Lower Fairfield County, you're not going to find those kind of rents in the general market. The last thing I want to say is in my written testimony, I put in an appendix with a whole packet of information about things about 8-30G that I've kind of accumulated over the years. And so I would encourage you to take a look at that if you want more detailed information. And again, I'm very happy to answer any questions that people may have. And I appreciate the chance to have been able to testify today. So thank you very much.
No problem. That was some pretty good information. Any questions for Mr. Podolsky? None? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Robert Flanagan. I think I see you down there. Mr. Flanagan. All right, we'll skip over for him for now. Eliza Lord. I don't even see that name. So Mark Garlasco. This person I do see,
Hello,
Paula.
Mr. Flanagan's here. Mr. Flanagan's here.
Okay, hold up, Paula. Mr. Flanagan, please proceed. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, I support this bill 169 because we definitely in this state need more study. The way this Section 830, it's just like the other gentleman said, you're railroading everything. It's unrealistic. Section 8, the old Section 8 was equitable and it supplied housing like it has for many years. But I don't appreciate how this bill 30G supersedes all town zoning. That's not right. Okay, also, one size doesn't fit all. Every town is different. That's why you have zoning. In this whole hearing today, I haven't heard anything about an environmental impact study or an economic one. I don't believe that this is not going to cost towns. It will. It's going to be added services. I'm not saying that we don't need affordable housing. We do. But like I said, Section 8 afforded it. But the environmental study, they're talking about stacking up units, taller units. And there's a lot of towns that have septics and wells, and there's no talk about how it's going to affect that. You know, that's not right. And you're going to also, no matter what happens here, you're going to get a reduction in property value. And another thing that's going to happen is you're going to have people who move out of the state. I mean, it's not right here. And it's actually bad equity, the way this is positioned and formed. And builders, you're offering them a tax incentive to do that. You're not doing anything for the taxpayers, okay? And another thing I don't appreciate here, I was a lifelong Democrat, a union Democrat, Teamsters, and as a taxpayer, I don't see myself being represented here. When you're changing zonings, you're dictating to people, and that is totally unacceptable. That shouldn't go forward that way. Everybody has a right to speak, and their opinions are being thrown out. Okay, we pay for everything here. We pay for the legislature, we pay for all these housings, everything. And we're not being afforded proper, nobody's listening to us, and they're ramming this down our throat. And that's why we need to further study this. It's got to have a great impact here. And this is the way it is right now. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. I know it's been in effect for a few years, but it's not one size fits all. Every town is different. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. I appreciate your comments. Just want to say one comment that we're not proposing any new language. This is a law that's been on the books for well over 22 years.
I'm familiar with that, sir.
We're not proposing any new changes to it.
Yeah, but when you go in and you override town zoning, that is a change.
I just want to be clear. Thank you very much for your time. Paulo Vargas.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the Housing Committee for giving me the space and time to speak today. My name is Paola Vargas, and I'm here in support of SB 169. I'm currently a graduate student at UConn, the School of Social Work, and an employee of the Western Connecticut Area Agency on Aging. I work with seniors in Waterbury, helping them with benefits and getting resources, and it's for them that I'm advocating for. HUD defines affordable housing as an occupant who pays no more than 30% of their gross income for housing costs, including utilities. The average client that I work with receives approximately $1,500 monthly through Social Security. 30% of that would be $450 per month. However, the average studio that in Waterbury rents out for $790, and not including utilities. In the way that affordable housing is defined, it's not accessible and it's nearly impossible to find. There are very few HUD housing sites in Waterbury that my clients could apply for, where the rent is stabilized. And so when I sit down with the senior, I'll fill out 5 to 6 applications, put them in the mail, and then the senior turns to me and asks me, "What now? When will I hear back from them?" It pains me to tell them the truth, anywhere between 1 to 3 years. My clients don't have time to wait and are left to scramble. Some are lucky and can stay with family in the meantime. Many are not, and are forced to deal with anticipated homelessness. The 65 plus demographic is the fastest growing age group of people who are becoming homeless. So I urge that if this study were to come to fruition, I hope that we can find ways to strategize how to address housing insecurity and chronic homelessness among the 65 plus demographic. Thank you again for your time and have a great evening. If anyone has any questions for me.
No problem. Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Vargas? Seeing none, thank you and have a nice night. I believe we're on to the last listed testifier, Maria Weingarten. Please feel free to.
Last but not least, I'm like, really? Last one? Okay, here we go.
Oh, you never know. So some of the early ones that weren't around might come back. We'll see.
Okay. Good evening, I guess at this point, right? Senators, representatives. My name is Maria Weingarten. I'm a resident of New Canaan, like Scott Hobbs, who spoke earlier. I support SB 169 and thank you for bringing this bill to a discussion, though disappointingly, there's very few concrete details within this bill as it has been raised. I recommend that the committee do create a rigorous bipartisan committee of legislators, town executives, local housing authority leaders, planning and zoning commissioners, and land use officials to analyze the effects of such policies. Particular importance is speaking to affordable housing committee chairs like Scott Hobbs, who can really very specifically detail the challenges that he has encountered in getting shovels in the ground for affordable housing development. The 10% threshold under 830G and 20% on the fair share bill that's likely going to be presented next week at some point is unrealistic for towns that solely develop their own housing like we are doing, buildings, due to the high building cost in Fairfield County. It costs about $450,000 to $600,000 per unit in New Canaan to develop a single affordable housing building, to develop that. And that's not including land cost. It's very expensive. Expecting towns as well to get to a goal through a inclusionary zoning policy of like 20 to 30% affordable means we would have to double our entire housing stock. Again, given the limitations of septic and all those other of sewer systems, that's also a great concern. Further, the housing, although that might be affordable to a resident, it doesn't make a town more affordable. The costs in a Norwalk versus a New Canaan even are dramatic. I shop in Norwalk. And so I think it's important to realize that while there are some ways to do this, it's quite a challenge. I'm going to go and twist it a little bit and talk about it in a different way. I saw a press release that came out in April 12th of 2021 that detailed press from the governor funds that were given as grants to build affordable housing. Of the 49 million in grants, 52% of that money went to 3 cities, Hartford, New Haven, and Waterbury. So those towns all have their affordable 10% threshold of affordable housing. So we were slated to get some funding from the state, and that just all of a sudden disappeared before COVID and was removed entirely. So I think we have to realize that the state and the legislators also have a hand in where development has occurred. And if one way to look at this is maybe some of these funds that are used to develop affordable housing in towns where people are really trying to develop affordable housing, some of those funds maybe should go to some of these communities where it is really hard to develop, land cost is really high, and that might be a carrot approach to getting you to what you guys are looking for, wherever what we're all aiming for is to create more affordability. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. And hopefully this will be over soon. You guys all get to go home soon. Thank you.
We are home. That's the beauty
Oh,
of Zoom.
yeah, there's that. It is Zoom, isn't it? Never mind.
Cooking dinner, on the other hand, is another challenge.
There's that.
I don't see any other constituents and residents, just us legislators and staff. So unless I'm missing something, Mr. Clerk, I think we can wrap up tonight, unless there's any questions.
I think we're good. We have everyone in the attendees has already testified, so we're good.
Wonderful. All right, everyone, thanks. That was smooth and informative, and I'm happy for it. Any comments, Representative Williams?
Thank you, Senator Lopes. Just wanted to once again thank our clerk for keeping all of us organized. Want to thank everyone for joining in this informative hearing, and look forward to rereading everyone's testimony, and particularly looking and working with Representative Paletta on looking at how we can have another educational forum to be able to make sure that we are all on the same page regarding both 830G and the rules around it, and also any the development of housing period for all budgets. So just want to say thank you for everyone participating, and glad that we can all be here with open ears and hearts.
Senator Ciccarella, any comments?
Just wanted to say good night and look forward to working with you guys further the rest of this short session.
I do have to make one comment, is that the leadership, you, me, Representative Paletta and Representative Williams get together to screen this in person. We all should wear matching tracksuits, very similar to what Representative Paletta was wearing. I think it would go a long way to building cohesion and, you know, confidence with each other. I don't know if I
like
own
it.
one. But
I'll have to order one. Who am I kidding? I probably have a couple in the closet. So
it won't be matching. Mine will be better than everyone's. I'm just gonna put that out there.
There you go.
For everybody, I'll go with purple. All right.
There you go.
Bye.
Have a great night, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.